To our amazing viewers at Infidelity Tales Lab, welcome and thank you. Your presence makes these stories worth sharing. We'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Opportunity. Maxwell Porter hunched over his laptop at the kitchen table, his coffee long gone cold. The email from Helix Dynamics had arrived 3 hours ago, and he still couldn't believe it. After 15 years of grinding away at mid-level engineering positions, watching younger colleagues leapfrog past him into management, Maxwell finally had a shot. Regional Operations Director, he whispered, scrolling through the details again. The salary was nearly triple what he made now. A company car, comprehensive benefits, relocation assistance to Denver. The front door opened, and Vanessa strode in wearing designer workout gear that had never seen a drop of sweat. Her honey blonde hair was perfectly styled, not a strand out of place. She dropped her purse on the counter and frowned at Maxwell. Still on that computer? I thought you were going to fix the garage door today. Maxwell looked up, unable to contain his excitement. I got it, Ness. The Helix job. They want you to come in tomorrow for the final interview. Vanessa's eyes widened. Helix Dynamics? The one in Denver. She crossed the kitchen and peered over his shoulder at the screen. Max, that's incredible. For a moment, Maxwell saw a flicker of the woman he'd fallen in love with 20 years ago. They met in college. She was studying business administration. He was in engineering. Back then, they dreamed of building a life together, maybe starting their own company someday. But somewhere along the way, Vanessa's ambitions had shifted from career success to social climbing, and their partnership had slowly corroded. Does this mean we'd have to move? She asked, her enthusiastic tone faltering. Yes, but they're offering relocation assistance. Think about it, Ness. A fresh start for us, for the family. Their 16-year-old daughter, Zoe, trudged into the kitchen, headphones clamped over her ears. She made a beeline for the refrigerator, ignoring both parents. Zoe, Maxwell said loudly. I have some news. Zoe rolled her eyes and removed one earbud. What? I've been offered a final interview for a director position at Helix Dynamics. Zoe shrugged. Cool, I guess. She grabbed a yogurt and retreated back upstairs. Maxwell sighed. He and Zoe had been close when she was younger, but the past few years had driven a wedge between them. Lately, she seemed to mirror her mother's dismissive attitude toward him. Don't take it personally, Vanessa said, checking her reflection in the microwave door. She's a teenager. Everything's dramatic at that age. Yeah. Maxwell closed his laptop. I need to prepare for tomorrow. This could change everything for us. Vanessa smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'm sure you'll do great, honey. As she headed upstairs, Maxwell missed the text message lighting up her phone. He got the interview. We need to talk. Now. The next morning, Maxwell adjusted his tie in the bedroom mirror. His reflection showed a man in his early 40s with dark hair graying at the temples, serious brown eyes behind horn-rimmed glasses, and the hint of stress lines around his mouth. But today there was something else there. Hope. Vanessa appeared behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. You look handsome, she murmured, resting her chin on his shoulder. Maxwell tensed slightly. This affection felt foreign after months of polite distance between them. Thanks. I'm nervous. Don't be. You've earned this. She straightened his already straight tie. What time will you be home? Late afternoon, probably. The interview's at 11. Then they're taking me to lunch. Vanessa nodded. I'll have dinner ready. Something special to celebrate. Maxwell kissed her cheek, surprised but pleased by her support. Maybe this was what they needed. A shared goal, a fresh start. As he headed downstairs, he spotted Zoe sitting at the kitchen counter, scrolling through her phone. Surprisingly, she wasn't wearing headphones. Good luck, Dad, she said without looking up. Hope you get it. Maxwell smiled. Thanks, kiddo. See you tonight. The drive to Helix Dynamics regional office took 40 minutes. Maxwell rehearsed answers to potential questions, breathing deeply to calm his nerves. This wasn't just a job. It was redemption, a chance to prove himself after years of being overlooked. The interview went better than he could have hoped. The hiring manager, Diane Forrester, was impressed with his technical knowledge and leadership philosophy. They discussed his vision for streamlining operations, his experience with cross-functional team management, and his ideas for improving vendor relationships. "I have to say, Maxwell," Diane said as they wrapped up lunch, "you're exactly what we're looking for. I just need to run things by the executive team, but I expect we'll have an offer for you by the end of the week." Maxwell could hardly contain his elation on the drive home. He called Vanessa, but she didn't pick up. He left a voicemail instead, sharing the good news. He walked through the front door just after 4, expecting to find Vanessa preparing the celebration dinner she'd promised. Instead, the house was quiet. "Ness?" "Zoe," he called out. He found Zoe in the living room, sprawled on the couch with her laptop. "Where's your mom?" he asked. Zoe shrugged. She had to run errands. Said she'll be back soon. She glanced up. "How'd the interview go?" "Great. Really great." Maxwell loosened his tie. "They're going to make an offer." Something flickered across Zoe's face. Concern? Fear? She quickly looked back at her screen. "That's good, I guess." Maxwell frowned. "You guess?" "Zoe, this is a huge opportunity for our family." "Yeah, but Denver? All my friends are here. My school. Everything." She slammed her laptop shut. "But whatever. It's not like my opinion matters." Before Maxwell could respond, she stormed upstairs, leaving him standing alone in the living room, his victory suddenly tasting bitter. Chapter 2. Shadows of Doubt. 3 days later, Maxwell still hadn't received the promised offer from Helix Dynamics. Each time he checked his email or phone, anxiety gnawed at him. Had he misread Diane's enthusiasm? Had another candidate edged him out? "Maybe you should call them," Vanessa suggested over breakfast, barely looking up from her phone. She'd been unusually attentive since his interview, asking detailed questions about the company and the position. "I don't want to seem desperate," Maxwell replied, pushing his eggs around his plate. Diane said by the end of the week. "That's today." "Well, sitting here stressing won't help." Vanessa stood and rinsed her coffee cup. "I'm meeting Audrey for brunch. Try to get out of the house. Clear your head." Maxwell nodded absently. He planned to work on his resume, just in case. Have fun. After Vanessa left, Maxwell retreated to his home office, a converted corner of the basement with a desk and a bookshelf. He was updating his LinkedIn profile when his phone rang. The caller ID showed Helix Dynamics. His heart pounded as he answered. Maxwell Porter speaking. "Maxwell, this is Diane Forrester." Her voice sounded strained. "Do you have a moment to talk?" "Of course," Maxwell said, his mouth going dry. "I'm not sure how to say this, but we've decided to go in another direction with the regional director position." Maxwell felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. "I see. May I ask why?" "I thought the interview went well." There was a long pause. "It did. Extremely well. But we received a call yesterday that raised some concerns." "A call? From whom?" Another pause. "From your wife?" "Actually." The room seemed to tilt. "My wife?" "Yes. She called and declined the position on your behalf. She said you'd reconsidered due to family obligations." Maxwell gripped the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. I didn't." When we expressed surprise, she recommended another candidate. "Someone named Preston Holbrook?" She said he was a family friend with extensive qualifications. The name hit Maxwell like a freight train. Preston Holbrook, Vanessa's college boyfriend, the one she occasionally mentioned with a distant look in her eyes, the successful investment banker who'd chosen his career over her. "There's been a misunderstanding," Maxwell said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "I never authorized my wife to speak on my behalf, and I certainly didn't decline the position." "I suspected something wasn't right," Diane said softly. "That's why I'm calling directly. But I'm afraid it's too late. We've already extended an offer to Mr. Holbrook, and he's accepted." Maxwell closed his eyes, trying to process the betrayal. "I understand. Thank you for telling me." After hanging up, he sat motionless, his mind racing. Why would Vanessa sabotage his career opportunity? And why recommend Preston, of all people? He was still sitting there, stunned, when he heard the garage door open. Footsteps overhead. Laughter. Not just Vanessa's voice, but a man's too, deep and confident. Maxwell crept upstairs and paused in the kitchen doorway. Vanessa was unpacking groceries, while a tall, athletic man with salt and pepper hair leaned against the counter, holding a glass of wine. Even after 2 decades, Maxwell recognized Preston Holbrook immediately. "I still can't believe you pulled it off," Preston was saying. "The look on Diane's face when you called was priceless." Vanessa laughed. "It wasn't hard. Max tells me everything about his work. I knew exactly what to say to make it convincing. And now I get to sweep in and be the hero." Preston sipped his wine. "Regional director. Not bad for a guy who was considering a career change anyway." "Denver's perfect," Vanessa said. "Close enough to visit easily. Far enough that Max won't accidentally run into you." Preston set down his glass and pulled Vanessa into his arms. "How long before you break the news that you're leaving him?" "A month, maybe 2. I need to get Zoe on board first. She's already warming up to the idea of moving in with you." "Actually," Maxwell said, stepping into the kitchen, "I think you should explain right now." Vanessa jerked away from Preston, her face draining of color. "Max, you're supposed to be what?" "Looking for another job because my wife sabotaged my career opportunity." His voice was deadly calm, but inside, something was breaking. "Or maybe I'm supposed to be oblivious to the fact that my wife and daughter are planning to leave me for her ex-boyfriend?" Preston straightened to his full height, a good 3 inches taller than Maxwell. "Now, Porter, let's be reasonable." "Get out of my house," Maxwell said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Preston glanced at Vanessa, who nodded slightly. He grabbed his jacket. "Call me later," he murmured to her, before brushing past Maxwell. Once the front door closed, Vanessa's shock transformed into defiance. "You weren't supposed to find out this way." "How was I supposed to find out? After you'd already moved to Denver with my daughter and the man you recommended for the job that should have been mine?" "It wouldn't have worked out anyway," Vanessa said dismissively. "You're not director material, Max. You never have been. You're too passive, too content with mediocrity." Each word cut deeper than the last. "And Preston is everything I'm not. Is that it? He has ambition, drive. He doesn't just talk about dreams. He makes them happen." Vanessa crossed her arms. "We reconnected at my college reunion last year. He's divorced now, and he wanted to rekindle what we had. So the past year of distance between us, the cold shoulders, the criticism, that was all leading up to this. I was going to tell you after you'd processed losing the job. Make it seem like the natural end to a marriage that's been failing for years." She sighed. "Zoe needs a stronger role model. Max, someone who can set her up for success, not us." She gestured vaguely at their modest home. The mention of Zoe reignited Maxwell's anger. "Does our daughter know about this scheme? The call to Helix?" Vanessa hesitated. "She knows Preston and I are together. She knows we're planning a future that includes her." As if on cue, Zoe walked through the front door, freezing when she saw the tension between her parents. "What's going on?" she asked, dropping her backpack. "Your mother was just explaining how she and Preston Holbrook have been planning to destroy my career and our marriage," Maxwell said coldly. Zoe's eyes darted to Vanessa. "You told him? I thought we agreed to wait." The confirmation of his daughter's involvement felt like a knife to Maxwell's heart. "So you did know? Dad, it's not what you think." "Really? Because it looks like my wife and daughter have been plotting behind my back to replace me with a more successful model." Zoe lifted her chin defiantly, suddenly looking so much like her mother. "Well, you're better off as a housekeeper anyway. That's basically what you've been for years while Mom supported us." Maxwell recoiled as if she'd slapped him. It was true that Vanessa's real estate business had out-earned his engineering salary for the past few years, but he'd never thought his own daughter saw him as nothing more than domestic help. Before he could respond, Vanessa's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and frowned before answering. "Preston? What's wrong?" Even from across the room, Maxwell could hear the furious voice on the other end. Vanessa's face paled as she listened. "That's impossible," she said. "How could they rescind the offer already?" Maxwell watched as his wife's carefully constructed plan began to unravel before his eyes. And deep within him, something cold and calculating stirred to life. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Chapter 3, The Awakening. Maxwell lay awake in the guest bedroom, staring at the ceiling. It had been 3 days since his world imploded. 3 days of icy silence between him and Vanessa. 3 days of Zoe avoiding his gaze. 3 days of plotting, Preston's job offer had indeed been rescinded. Apparently, Diane Forrester had done some additional checking after a call with Maxwell and discovered that Preston had exaggerated his qualifications. The irony might have been satisfying if Maxwell's own career prospects hadn't been collateral damage. His phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. Mr. Porter, this is Diane Forrester. I've been doing some thinking. Can we meet tomorrow? Privately. Maxwell sat up, pulse quickening. He typed back, yes. Name a time and place. She suggested a coffee shop halfway between his home and the Helix office. 10 a.m. Sleep eluded him as his mind raced with possibilities. Was Diane going to offer him the position after all? Or perhaps warn him about something else Vanessa and Preston were planning? The next morning, he told Vanessa he was meeting with a headhunter. She barely acknowledged him, still reeling from the collapse of her carefully orchestrated plan. Without Preston's job at Helix, their future together had hit a significant roadblock. Diane was already at the coffee shop when Maxwell arrived, 2 steaming mugs on the table before her. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as he slid into the booth across from her. "I appreciate you reaching out." Maxwell wrapped his hands around the mug. "I assume this is about the regional director position?" Diane's expression turned apologetic. "Yes and no. The position has been filled, but not by Preston Holbrook. After our conversation and some additional vetting, I realized neither of you were right for the role." Maxwell's hope deflated. "I see. However," Diane continued, "something about your situation has been bothering me. The way your wife interfered, it was deeply unprofessional and, frankly, disturbing." "You're not the only one disturbed by it," Maxwell said bitterly. "I did some digging into Preston Holbrook." Diane pulled out a folder. "What I found raises serious questions about his business ethics. Questionable investment practices, manipulated client accounts, a trail of regulatory warnings that never quite reached the level of criminal charges." Maxwell frowned. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I think you deserve to know who your wife was planning to leave you for." She pushed the folder across the table. "And because I think you might be exactly what Helix needs, just not in Denver." Maxwell's eyes snapped up from the folder. "What do you mean?" "We're launching a new division here in Seattle. Advanced Engineering Solutions for Sustainable Urban Development. We need someone with your technical background and leadership potential to head it up. It's not operations, but the compensation is comparable, and you wouldn't have to relocate. You're offering me a job? After everything that's happened?" Diane smiled. "I'm good at reading people, Maxwell. What your wife did speaks volumes about her, not you. The position is yours if you want it." Maxwell felt the weight lifting from his shoulders. "When would I start?" 2 weeks. Though given your home situation, I'd understand if you needed time to sort things out." "No," Maxwell said firmly. 2 weeks is perfect." He glanced at the folder. "May I keep this?" "It's yours. Do with it what you will." Diane stood and extended her hand. "Welcome to Helix Dynamics, Maxwell." As they shook hands, Maxwell felt something shift inside him. The passive, accommodating man he'd been was gone. In his place stood someone colder, more calculating. Someone who wouldn't rest until those who had betrayed him paid the price. Back in his car, he opened the folder and began to read. Preston Holbrook's history of ethical lapses was extensive, though carefully concealed beneath a veneer of success and charm. But it wasn't the investment improprieties that caught Maxwell's attention. It was a small note about Preston's personal life. Subject has pattern of relationships with married women in vulnerable positions. Current suspected paramour, Vanessa Porter, married to potential Helix employee Maxwell Porter. Previous, Audrey Whitman, now divorced. Audrey Whitman, Vanessa's best friend. The one she'd been meeting for brunch regularly for the past year. Maxwell pulled out his phone and searched for Audrey on social media. Her profile showed a bitter divorce had finalized 8 months ago. Around the same time Vanessa had attended her college reunion and reconnected with Preston. The pieces were falling into place. Preston's pattern, Audrey's divorce, Vanessa's betrayal, and somewhere in all of this, his daughter had been turned against him. Maxwell started the car, a plan crystallizing in his mind. He'd take the job at Helix. He'd gather evidence of Preston's unethical business practices. He'd uncover every secret, every lie, every manipulation. And then, when the time was right, he'd use it all to dismantle the lies of those who had tried to destroy his. As he drove home, his phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Where are you?" "Mom's freaking out." He ignored it. Let them worry. Let them wonder. The game had changed, and Maxwell Porter was no longer playing by their rules. Chapter 4. Calculated Moves. 2 weeks into his new position at Helix Dynamics, Maxwell settled into his corner office with a view of Elliott Bay. The division he now headed, Sustainable Urban Engineering Solutions, was Helix's fastest-growing sector, with projects across the Pacific Northwest and potential contracts in California and British Columbia. At home, an uneasy truce had formed. Vanessa had attempted to explain away her betrayal as a momentary lapse in judgment when Maxwell revealed his new job. She'd claimed that she and Preston had realized they'd made a mistake, that she wanted to work on their marriage. Maxwell had nodded, smiled, and pretended to consider it while secretly moving forward with his plans. Step 1 was already complete: financial independence. His new salary was double what he'd made before, and the signing bonus had allowed him to open a separate bank account that Vanessa knew nothing about. Step 2 was in progress: gathering intelligence. He'd hired a private investigator named Ryan Mercer, a former military intelligence officer with a reputation for discretion and thoroughness. "Tell me about your wife's daily routine," Ryan said during their first meeting in Maxwell's office after hours. Maxwell slid a detailed schedule across the desk. "She leaves the house at 9 a.m. most days, supposedly for her real estate office. But she only has showings or client meetings 3 days a week, according to her online calendar." Ryan studied the schedule. "And you want to know where she goes during the unaccounted hours?" "Yes. And I want documentation of her meetings with Preston Holbrook." Maxwell handed over a photograph of Preston. "I need evidence that their relationship is ongoing." "What about your daughter?" Ryan asked. "You mentioned she's involved somehow." Maxwell's jaw tightened. "Zoe has been influenced by her mother. I need to know if she's meeting with Preston too, and what they're telling her about me." Ryan nodded, making notes. "And this Preston character, you want background on him beyond what's in the Helix folder?" "Everything. Financial history, business dealings, personal relationships. Especially any evidence of unethical behavior that could be reported to regulatory authorities." "What's your endgame here, Maxwell?" Ryan's expression was professionally neutral. "Are you building a case for divorce? Custody? Revenge?" Maxwell met his gaze steadily. "All of the above." After Ryan left, Maxwell turned to his computer and pulled up a secure email account he'd created specifically for his revenge project. In it were folders labeled Vanessa, Preston, Zoe, and Financial Strategy. Each contained meticulously organized information, schedule details, account numbers, copies of text messages he'd managed to extract from the family cloud account. He clicked on a new email from Ryan, sent just hours after their meeting. Attached was a preliminary report on Preston Holbrook's movements. The investment banker had been spotted meeting Vanessa at an upscale hotel downtown, staying for 3 hours in the middle of a workday. Maxwell saved the photos to his Vanessa folder. Not enough for a confrontation yet, but a promising start. His phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Coming home for dinner?" The casual message, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't betrayed him alongside her mother, made his blood boil. But he forced himself to respond neutrally, "Working late." "Don't wait up." In reality, he had other plans for the evening. He'd arranged to meet Audrey Whitman, Vanessa's recently divorced friend, at a quiet bar near her apartment. Audrey was already on her second martini when Maxwell arrived. She looked surprised to see him, though she'd agreed to the meeting readily enough when he'd called claiming he wanted her advice about his marriage. "Maxwell," she said, her speech slightly slurred. "I wasn't sure you'd show." "Thanks for meeting me," he said, sliding into the booth. "I know it's a bit unusual." Audrey studied him through narrowed eyes. "Vanessa doesn't know you're here, does she?" "No, and I'd prefer to keep it that way." He ordered a scotch from a passing server. "I wanted to talk to you because I think we might have something in common." "What's that?" Audrey's guard was up, but curiosity flickered in her eyes. "Preston Holbrook." The color drained from Audrey's face. She took a large gulp of her martini. What about him? I know he was involved with you before your divorce. I know he's involved with Vanessa now, and I suspect he follows a pattern. Audrey stared at her empty glass. Why are you here, Maxwell? To gloat? To tell me I got what I deserved for sleeping with a man like Preston? No. Maxwell leaned forward. I'm here because I want to understand how he operates. How he manipulated you. How he's manipulating my wife, and by extension, my daughter. The server brought Maxwell scotch and another martini for Audrey. After she left, Audrey sighed deeply. It started at a charity gala. My husband Douglas was there, but he spent the whole night networking, ignoring me as usual. Preston was charming, attentive. He made me feel seen. She twisted her cocktail napkin. The affair started a week later. And then, Preston convinced me that Douglas was holding me back, that I deserved better, that we could build an amazing life together once I left my marriage. Her laugh was bitter. Sound familiar? Very. Maxwell said, What happened after your divorce? Preston was supportive at first. Then he started finding excuses to cancel plans. Then I found out about, she stopped abruptly. About Vanessa? Audrey nodded miserably. He claimed they'd reconnected innocently at her college reunion, but I found messages going back months before that. She looked up at Maxwell, her eyes red-rimmed. I tried to warn her, but she wouldn't listen. Said their situation was different. Said they had a special connection that I wouldn't understand. And now you're alone. While Preston moves on to his next target, Maxwell observed. Story of my life. Audrey downed half her fresh martini. Douglas took everything in the divorce. The house, most of our savings. All I got was this crappy apartment and alimony that barely covers the rent. Maxwell saw an opportunity. What if you could get some of that back? What if Preston faced consequences for his actions? Audrey's eyes narrowed. What are you suggesting? I'm gathering information on Preston. His business practices, his pattern with women like you and Vanessa. I could use someone on the inside, someone who still has access to certain circles. You want me to spy for you? Audrey seemed more intrigued than offended. I want us to help each other. Maxwell slid a business card across the table. Think about it. If you decide to join me, call this number. It's a secure line. Back in his car, Maxwell added notes to his phone about his meeting with Audrey. Another piece in place. If she agreed to help, she could provide access to social circles where Preston operated, potentially uncovering more victims of his predatory pattern. His phone buzzed again. Vanessa, where are you? It's after 9. He typed back. Client meeting ran long. Home in 30. The lie came easily now, just like they had for her. When he arrived home, the house was quiet except for the sound of the TV in the living room. Vanessa was curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when he entered. Productive day? She asked, her tone carefully neutral. Very. Maxwell hung his coat in the closet. New project is taking off faster than expected. That's great. Vanessa hesitated. Zoe was hoping to talk to you about college applications. She's considering engineering programs. Maxwell hid his surprise. Zoe had never expressed interest in engineering before. Is that so? She admires your new position. I think she's reconsidering her options. A test, then, to see if he still cared about Zoe's future. To see if he could be manipulated through his love for his daughter. I'll talk to her this weekend, Maxwell said, keeping his tone casual. Though if she's serious about engineering, she should start with Stanford. Best program on the West Coast. Vanessa smiled, seemingly satisfied that he'd passed her test. That's what I told her. She's worried about her math grades, though. I could help her with that. Another piece of the puzzle. Keep Zoe close. Understand what Vanessa and Preston had been telling her. Potentially turn her back to his side, or at least ensure she wasn't a pawn in their game. Later, lying in bed beside his wife, Maxwell stared at the ceiling and calculated his next moves. Audrey was a promising ally. Ryan was gathering valuable intelligence. His position at Helix was secure and growing stronger. But the most crucial piece, the evidence that would destroy Preston Holbrook, was still missing. For that, he needed someone with access to Preston's professional world. Someone who knew where the bodies were buried in the investment banking industry. Tomorrow, he would start looking for that someone. The hunter was becoming more skilled with each passing day. Chapter 5. Hidden Alliances. 6 weeks into his revenge plan, Maxwell had established a new rhythm to his life. By day, he was the innovative director of Helix's sustainable engineering division, growing their client base and impressing executives with his strategic vision. By night, he was a methodical architect of retribution, piecing together the puzzle of Preston Holbrook's vulnerabilities. Ryan Mercer had delivered comprehensive surveillance reports documenting Vanessa's ongoing affair with Preston. They met 3 times a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, and Sunday afternoons at Preston's downtown penthouse, while Maxwell took Zoe to their newly established father-daughter coding sessions. Those Sunday afternoons with Zoe had become an unexpected complication in Maxwell's emotional landscape. His daughter, sensing a shift in his career success and confidence, had gradually warmed to him again. She was genuinely interested in learning programming, and Maxwell found himself enjoying their time together despite knowing she still met with Preston and Vanessa for family planning dinners twice a month. "Can I ask you something, Dad?" Zoe said one Sunday as they worked through a JavaScript problem together in his home office. "Sure, kiddo. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd gotten that job in Denver instead?" Maxwell's fingers paused over the keyboard. "Sometimes." "What?" Zoe shrugged, not meeting his eyes. "I just wonder if things would be better or worse. If we'd be happier. Do you think we're not happy now?" "I don't know. Mom seems stressed lately. You're working all the time, and I keep feeling like there's something nobody's telling me." Maxwell studied his daughter's profile, seeing vulnerability beneath the teenage bravado. How much did she really know about Vanessa and Preston's plans? Had they been honest with her, or was she just another pawn in their game? "Sometimes adults have complicated feelings that are hard to explain," he said carefully. "But I want you to know that whatever happens between me and your mom, we both love you. And my door is always open if you have questions." Zoe nodded, seemingly satisfied with his answer for now. But Maxwell filed away the conversation, another data point in his growing assessment of the situation. The next morning, Maxwell met with his newest ally in his campaign against Preston Holbrook, Margot Winters, a former compliance officer at Preston's investment firm who had been quietly forced out after raising concerns about certain client accounts. Their meeting place was a small cafe near Pike Place Market, crowded enough to provide anonymity, but quiet enough for conversation. "I brought what you asked for," Margot said after they'd exchanged pleasantries. She slid a flash drive across the table. "It's everything I saved before they escorted me out. Transaction records, client complaints, internal emails about creative accounting practices." Maxwell pocketed the drive. "Thank you. This could be extremely valuable. Just remember our deal," Margot said, her eyes hard. "When you take him down, I get public vindication. I want every financial news outlet to know I was right all along." "Absolutely." Maxwell sipped his coffee. "Have you heard anything from your former colleagues about Preston's current activities?" Margot leaned forward. "That's actually why I wanted to meet in person. There's a rumor that Preston's starting his own boutique investment firm, targeting high-net-worth individuals with exclusive investment opportunities. Within the next 2 months. He's quietly recruiting clients from his current firm, including," she hesitated, "including your wife. Word is she's liquidating some real estate holdings to become an early investor." Maxwell felt a cold fury settle in his chest. Vanessa was planning to invest in Preston's new venture? With what money? Their joint savings? The college fund they'd established for Zoe? "Do you know how much she's planning to invest?" Margot shook her head. "But Preston's minimum buy-in is $500,000, and he's promising early investors a 20% return within the first year, which is impossible without cooking the books," Maxwell concluded. "Exactly. It has all the hallmarks of a Ponzi scheme. New investor money paying returns to early investors, while Preston schemes off the top." Maxwell nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. "This changes the timeline. I need to move faster." "What's your plan?" Margot asked. "You'll know when it happens," Maxwell replied. "But I think it's time to involve the Securities and Exchange Commission. Anonymously, of course." Back at his office, Maxwell plugged in Margot's flash drive and began sifting through the files. The evidence of Preston's unethical practices was damning. Manipulated returns, hidden fees, misleading investment prospectuses. But it was one particular folder labeled Holbrook Personal that caught Maxwell's attention. Inside were records of Preston's personal investments, including partnerships in several limited liability companies with ambiguous names. Maxwell cross-referenced these against property records and discovered that one of the LLCs owned the very penthouse where Preston met with Vanessa on Sundays. More interesting was an LLC called Horizon Ventures that had purchased a beachfront property on Whidbey Island 6 months ago, right around the time Preston had reconnected with Vanessa at her college reunion. Maxwell pulled up the property listing. 5 bedrooms, private beach access, panoramic views of Puget Sound. The perfect retreat for a newly formed family. He called Ryan immediately. I need surveillance on a property. He provided the address. I want to know if Vanessa and Preston have visited it together and whether my daughter has been there too. Next, he contacted his financial advisor and, without explaining why, ensured that all joint accounts with Vanessa now required dual authorization for withdrawals over $10,000. He also quietly moved his personal portion of their savings, approximately $300,000, into his private account at a different bank. That evening, Vanessa was waiting for him when he got home, a rare homemade dinner on the table and candles lit. What's the occasion? Maxwell asked, loosening his tie. No occasion. Just thought we could use a nice evening together. Vanessa poured wine into 2 glasses. You've been so busy with the new job. I feel like we hardly see each other anymore. Maxwell accepted the glass, studying his wife's face. She seemed nervous, her smile a little too bright. Where's Zoe? Sleepover at Brianna's house. It's just us tonight. Over dinner, Vanessa kept the conversation light. Neighborhood gossip, a new restaurant she wanted to try, a movie she thought they might enjoy together. But Maxwell could sense her building toward something. Finally, as they were finishing dessert, she reached for his hand across the table. I've been thinking a lot about us lately. About the future. Have you? Maxwell worked to keep his tone neutral. Yes, and I think we need a fresh start. Together. What did you have in mind? Vanessa's eyes lit up. I found a most amazing property on Whidbey Island. Beachfront, incredible views. It would be the perfect weekend getaway for now, and maybe a retirement home down the road. Maxwell felt a surge of cold satisfaction. She was laying the groundwork, trying to get him to help finance the very property Preston had already purchased as their love nest. Sounds expensive, he observed. It is, but with your new position in my real estate business, we could manage it. And I've been researching investment opportunities that could help us afford it even faster. What kind of investment opportunities? Vanessa hesitated for just a moment. A former client is starting a boutique investment firm. Minimum buy-in is high, but the projected returns are impressive. I was thinking we could use part of our savings as an initial investment. How much were you thinking? Maxwell asked, sipping his wine. 500,000? Vanessa watched his face carefully. I know it sounds like a lot, but we have almost 800,000 between our various accounts. And with a 20% return. That's quite ambitious, Maxwell interrupted. Who's the investment manager? A flicker of unease crossed Vanessa's face. His name is Preston Holbrook. He's very well regarded in the industry. Preston Holbrook? Wasn't that the name of your ex-boyfriend? The one you recommended for the Denver job. Vanessa faltered. Yes, that's right. I didn't make the connection immediately. The lie was so blatant that Maxwell almost laughed. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. I want to meet him before we invest that kind of money. Maybe the 3 of us could have dinner. Of course, Vanessa said quickly, relief evident in her voice. I'll arrange it. Perfect. Maxwell raised his glass in a toast. To new opportunities. Vanessa clinked her glass against his, unaware that she had just walked into the first phase of his trap. Later that night, after Vanessa had fallen asleep, Maxwell sent a series of encrypted messages to Margot, Ryan, and Audrey, outlining the next steps in his plan. The pieces were aligning perfectly. Now it was time to accelerate the endgame. Chapter 6, Counterpoint. The restaurant Vanessa chose for their dinner with Preston was Canlis, Seattle's most prestigious fine dining establishment, with panoramic views of Lake Union and a wine list that ran to dozens of pages. Maxwell arrived 10 minutes early, purposely selecting a moment when Vanessa was in the restroom to approach the table where Preston sat alone. Preston Holbrook, Maxwell said, extending his hand. We finally meet properly. Preston stood, his handshake firm, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Maxwell, Vanessa's told me so much about you. Funny, she's told me almost nothing about you, Maxwell replied pleasantly, taking a seat. Beyond the fact that you're starting an investment firm and looking for $500,000 of our money. Preston's smile tightened. I understand your caution. It's a significant investment, but I think you'll find the opportunity compelling once I walk you through the prospectus. I look forward to it. Maxwell flagged down a server and ordered a Macallan 18. Tell me, how did you and Vanessa reconnect? After the college reunion, I mean. A flicker of surprise crossed Preston's face. She mentioned that. Of course. We don't keep secrets from each other. Preston recovered quickly. We ran into each other at a charity event a few months after the reunion. Got to talking about old times, career paths. One thing led to another, and now here we are, discussing a business opportunity. Indeed, Maxwell noted Preston's practice deflection. And this business opportunity, is it related to the Whidbey Island property your LLC purchased 6 months ago? Preston's hand froze midway to his water glass. Before he could respond, Vanessa returned to the table, her face lighting up at the sight of the two men together. You've met. Wonderful. She slid into her seat beside Preston, an unconscious tell that Maxwell noted. Have you had a chance to discuss the investment yet? We were just getting to that, Maxwell said smoothly, though I was curious about Preston's other real estate holdings. He was telling me about a beautiful property on Whidbey Island. Vanessa's smile faltered momentarily, her eyes darting to Preston. Oh, I didn't realize you had property there. Preston cleared his throat. It's a recent acquisition, through one of my investment vehicles. Actually, it's not far from the property you were looking at. What a coincidence, Maxwell commented, watching the silent communication passing between his wife and her lover. The dinner proceeded with Preston delivering a well-rehearsed pitch about his new investment firm, Apex Capital Partners. He emphasized exclusive access to pre-IPO companies, private equity opportunities, and high-yield bonds unavailable to typical investors. The projected returns were impressive and highly improbable. 20% annual returns with minimal risk. Maxwell questioned, deliberately playing the skeptical but intrigued potential investor. That's substantially better than market average. It's about access, Preston explained. My connections in the industry allow me entry points that others simply don't have. And what safeguards are in place for investors? Regulatory oversight? Third-party auditing? A flash of annoyance crossed Preston's face before he masked it with a confident smile. We'll be fully SEC compliant, of course. But one advantage of our boutique structure is flexibility. Less red tape means more agility in the marketplace. Fascinating. Maxwell sipped his scotch. I'd like to see the complete prospectus, along with your personal investment track record for the past 5 years. For due diligence. Preston hesitated. Some of that information is proprietary, but I can certainly provide an overview. Preston has an impeccable reputation, Vanessa interrupted, placing her hand on Maxwell's arm. Everyone in the industry knows his results speak for themselves. Nevertheless, Maxwell said, gently removing her hand, I'd like to see the numbers before committing our savings. The rest of the dinner passed in a dance of politeness layered over tension. Preston continued his sales pitch while avoiding specific questions. Vanessa alternated between enthusiastic support of Preston's venture and anxious glances at Maxwell. And Maxwell played his role perfectly. Interested but cautious, asking just enough questions to appear engaged without revealing his knowledge of their affair or their plans. As they waited for the valet to bring their cars, Preston pulled Maxwell aside. I understand your hesitation, he said in a low voice. But this opportunity won't be available for long. I have several other investors ready to commit. I'm sure you do, Maxwell replied. But I never rush financial decisions, especially when they involve my family's future. Preston's smile tightened. Of course. Family first. Always. The implied threat was clear. Choose wisely, or your family's future might not include you. Maxwell simply nodded, a pleasant smile masking the cold calculation behind his eyes. "I'll be in touch, Preston." Very soon. 3 days later, Maxwell's plan shifted into high gear. The first domino fell when Ryan confirmed that Vanessa, Preston, and even Zoe had indeed visited the Whidbey Island property together the previous weekend, while Maxwell was supposedly at a business conference in Portland. The second domino was Audrey Whitman's discovery that she wasn't Preston's only previous victim. Through her social connections, she'd identified 3 other women with similar stories. All successful professionals who divorced their husbands at Preston's urging, invested in his exclusive opportunities, and been discarded once their funds were depleted. The third and most critical domino was Margot Winter's analysis of the flash drive data, which revealed that Preston had been systematically misrepresenting investment returns and siphoning client funds for years. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling, enough for the SEC to take interest. Maxwell assembled his allies at a private room in an unassuming restaurant in Bellevue, away from their usual haunts. Ryan, Audrey, and Margot sat around the table, each with a folder containing their part of the plan. "First, I want to thank you all for your help," Maxwell began. "What we're about to do will have significant consequences for everyone involved, including potentially ourselves. If anyone wants to back out, now's the time." No one moved. "Good." Maxwell opened his laptop. "Here's where we stand. Preston is planning to launch Apex Capital Partners in 2 weeks. He's recruited 15 investors so far, including my wife, who has been attempting to access our joint savings without my knowledge." "Has she succeeded?" Margot asked. "No. I've secured our assets, though she doesn't know that yet. She believes the transfer is being processed." Ryan flipped through his surveillance photos. "Based on their conversations I've recorded, Preston plans to use the initial investments to create the illusion of high returns, attracting a second wave of investors. Classic Ponzi structure." "And the Whidbey Island property?" Audrey asked. "Purchased through an LLC as their future home," Maxwell confirmed. "They've been there 3 times in the past month, including once with my daughter." Margot tapped her folder. "The SEC is interested in the evidence I provided anonymously, but they move slowly. If we want to stop Preston before he launches Apex and takes everyone's money, we need to accelerate things." Maxwell nodded. "That's why we're moving to Phase 2 tonight. Ryan has planted recording devices in Preston's penthouse. Audrey has arranged for one of Preston's previous victims to contact him, claiming she wants to invest in Apex. And Margot has scheduled a meeting with her former colleagues to share concerns about Preston's new venture." "What about you?" Ryan asked. "What's your next move with Vanessa?" Maxwell's expression hardened. "Tonight, I confront her. Not about the affair, not yet, but about attempting to access our savings without my knowledge. It's time to let her know that I'm not as oblivious as she thinks." The group spent the next hour refining details, synchronizing timelines, and preparing contingencies. As they were wrapping up, Audrey pulled Maxwell aside. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" she asked quietly. "It's not too late to simply divorce Vanessa and move on." Maxwell studied her face, seeing genuine concern there. "This stopped being about just Vanessa a long time ago. They tried to destroy my career, turn my daughter against me, and steal my savings. Actions have consequences. And what about Zoe? Have you considered how this will affect her?" A shadow crossed Maxwell's face. "Every day, but she's already chosen her side. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is show them the truth, even when it hurts." Audrey nodded, unconvinced but understanding. "Just be careful. Revenge can consume you if you let it." "This isn't revenge," Maxwell replied. "It's justice." That night, Maxwell returned home to find Vanessa pacing the kitchen, her face tight with worry. She froze when she saw him. "The bank called," she said without preamble. "They said there's a hold on our joint accounts. Something about unusual activity and needing dual authorization for large transfers." Maxwell set down his briefcase calmly. "Yes, I implemented that security measure recently. Given the amount of money involved, I thought it prudent. But I needed to transfer funds today," Vanessa said, a note of panic in her voice. "For a client's earnest money deposit." "Really?" "Because when I spoke to the bank, They said you were attempting to transfer $500,000 to an account belonging to Apex Capital Partners. Maxwell watched her face carefully. Preston's new investment firm. Vanessa paled. I was going to tell you about that. After I confirmed our spot. These investment opportunities fill up quickly, and I didn't want to miss out. So you decided to move $500,000 without discussing it with me? After our dinner where I specifically said I wanted to review the prospectus before making any decisions. You were being overly cautious, Vanessa countered, her shock giving way to defensiveness. Preston has an incredible track record. This could set us up for early retirement, that beachfront property we talked about. On Whidbey Island, Maxwell interrupted. Like the one Preston already owns through Horizon Ventures, LLC. Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed. How did you know about that? I know a lot of things, Vanessa. About Preston's business practices. About your Sunday afternoons at his penthouse while I'm with Zoe. About the plans you've been making that don't include me. The color drained from Vanessa's face. Max, I can explain. Save it. Maxwell's voice was ice. I'm not interested in explanations or excuses. What I want is for you to answer one question. How long have you been planning to leave me for Preston? Vanessa's shoulders slumped in defeat. Since the college reunion. We didn't mean for it to happen. We just reconnected. And Zoe was turning my daughter against me, part of the plan from the beginning. We never. Vanessa stopped, unable to complete the lie. We wanted her to understand that families change. That sometimes parents are happier apart. How considerate of you. Maxwell's tone was flat. And the Helix job in Denver? Was it your idea or Preston's? He said it was the perfect opportunity. You be focused on your new position away from Seattle while She trailed off. While you established your new life together here. Maxwell finished for her. With my money and my daughter. Vanessa looked up, tears in her eyes. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. You weren't supposed to find out until we were ready. Until you drained our accounts and positioned Preston as Zoe's new father figure, Maxwell corrected. Well, I have news for you, Vanessa. Your plan has failed. The accounts are secured. And Preston Holbrook's house of cards is about to come crashing down. What are you talking about? Vanessa's voice rose. What have you done? Maxwell smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. Nothing yet, but in exactly 1 week, Preston's career will be over, his assets frozen, and his freedom in jeopardy. The SEC doesn't look kindly on investment fraud. You're bluffing, Vanessa said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. Am I? I guess we'll find out. Maxwell turned toward the stairs. Oh, and don't bother trying to warn him. My sources at the SEC are already monitoring his communications. As he headed upstairs, Vanessa called after him. What about us? What about our marriage? Maxwell paused on the landing. That's entirely up to you now, Vanessa. You can either distance yourself from Preston immediately, or you can go down with him. Your choice. In the guest bedroom that had become his sanctuary, Maxwell sent a text message to Ryan. First confrontation complete. She'll contact Preston immediately. Record everything. The reply came seconds later. Already on it. Surveillance in place. She's calling him now. Maxwell smiled grimly as he prepared for bed. The counterattack was underway. Now it was time to watch the dominoes fall. Chapter 7. Collapse. The week following Maxwell's confrontation with Vanessa unfolded exactly as he'd planned. Panic had set in among his targets, accelerating the very behaviors that would lead to their downfall. Vanessa had immediately warned Preston about Maxwell's threats. Their late-night phone call, recorded by Ryan's surveillance equipment, revealed the depth of their deception and provided additional evidence of Preston's fraudulent business practices. He knows everything, Vanessa had sobbed into the phone. About us, about Whidbey Island, about Apex. He said the SEC is involved. Did he mention specific allegations? Preston had asked, his voice tight with controlled fear. Investment fraud. He said your assets would be frozen within a week. That's impossible. He's bluffing. Even if he had evidence, the SEC moves at a glacial pace. What if he's not bluffing? What if he really does have connections at the SEC? Preston's response had been revealing. Then we accelerate our timeline. I'll move the existing client funds offshore tomorrow. We'll push forward with Apex's launch, collect the initial investments, and be out of the country before the SEC can act. Those recorded words were now in the hands of the SEC Enforcement Division, along with the comprehensive evidence package Maxwell and his allies had compiled. The investigation that might have taken months had become an urgent priority. On Monday morning, 5 days after Maxwell's confrontation with Vanessa, the first public blow landed. The Seattle Times business section ran a small but pointed article questioning the legitimacy of Apex Capital Partners, citing anonymous industry sources concerned about unrealistic promised returns and the principal's history of regulatory warnings. Preston called an emergency meeting with his prospective investors that evening, assuring them that the article was merely a smear campaign by jealous competitors. Vanessa stood by his side, vouching for his integrity and reaffirming her own commitment to invest. What they didn't know was that Audrey Whitman had planted a loyal ally among the investors, another of Preston's former victims who is now working with Maxwell's team. She recorded the entire meeting, capturing Preston's increasingly desperate assurances and outright misrepresentations. On Tuesday, the second blow fell. 3 of Preston's former colleagues at his investment firm, carefully cultivated by Margot Winters, came forward with concerns about his past handling of client accounts. They didn't make public accusations, but their carefully worded statements to industry contacts created a ripple of doubt throughout Seattle's financial community. By Wednesday, 4 of Preston's 15 prospective investors had pulled out of Apex. Vanessa reported this to Maxwell during one of their increasingly tense dinners, attempting to gauge his reaction. "It's strange," she said, pushing food around her plate. Suddenly, everyone's questioning Preston's credentials, almost as if someone is orchestrating a campaign against him. Maxwell sipped his wine. The investment world is built on confidence. Once that's shaken, it's hard to restore. "You wouldn't know anything about this, would you?" Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "I told you what would happen," Maxwell replied evenly. "Whether you believe me or not is your choice." Zoe, who had been quiet throughout dinner, looked up sharply. "What are you guys talking about?" "Nothing, honey," Vanessa said quickly. "Just some business issues Preston is dealing with." "Preston?" Zoe repeated. "You mean the guy you're leaving Dad for?" The question hung in the air like a thunderclap. Vanessa's fork clattered onto her plate. "Zoe, that's not. I don't know what you've heard, but—" "Save it, Mom." Zoe pushed back from the table. "I'm not stupid. I've seen the way you look at him. I've heard your phone calls when you think I'm not listening." Maxwell studied his daughter, surprised by this development. "How long have you known?" Zoe turned to him, tears in her eyes. "Months. You both think I don't pay attention, but I do. I hear things. I see things. Then why did you go along with it?" Maxwell asked quietly. "The visits to Whidbey Island, the family planning dinners?" "Because I thought maybe Preston could make Mom happy again," Zoe said, her voice breaking. "And if Mom was happy, maybe our family wouldn't feel so broken all the time." Vanessa reached for Zoe's hand. "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I never meant for you to be caught in the middle of this." Zoe pulled her hand away. "But I am in the middle. And now Dad knows, and everything's falling apart. And it's all just—" She stood abruptly. "I can't do this right now." As she fled upstairs, Maxwell and Vanessa sat in stunned silence. "Are you satisfied?" Vanessa finally asked, her voice bitter. "Now you've turned Zoe against me too." "I didn't turn anyone against you," Maxwell said quietly. "You did that yourself." The next morning, Thursday, the third and most devastating blow landed. The SEC announced a formal investigation into Preston Holbrook's investment activities, citing credible evidence of securities fraud and misappropriation of client funds. His current firm placed him on immediate administrative leave, and financial news outlets ran the story prominently. Preston called Vanessa in a panic. Maxwell, anticipating this, had ensured that Ryan's surveillance covered their conversation. "It's happening," Preston said, his voice tight with fear. "Just like Porter said it would. The SEC showed up this morning. They've frozen my accounts, seized my files. What are we going to do?" Vanessa asked, clearly terrified. "We stick to the contingency plan. The offshore accounts are still secure. We just need to lay low until this blows over." "Blows over?" "Preston, this is the SEC. This doesn't just blow over. Trust me, Preston said, his voice hardening. I've dealt with regulatory issues before. The key is having enough liquid assets to fight back with high-powered attorneys, which is why I need you to secure that investment capital we discussed. Your $500,000. There was a long pause before Vanessa responded. I told you, Max put a hold on our joint accounts. I can't access that kind of money. What about your personal accounts? Your real estate commission fund? That's barely $100,000. And I need that for living expenses if things don't work out with Max. Preston's tone turned cold. So you're backing out. When I need you most. I'm not backing out, Vanessa protested. I just need time to figure out how to get the money without raising suspicions. Time is exactly what we don't have, Preston snapped. The SEC is moving faster than they should be able to. Someone has been feeding them information, detailed information that only an insider would have. You think Max has a source inside your firm? I think your husband is a lot more dangerous than either of us gave him credit for. On Friday morning, Maxwell arrived at his office to find an unexpected visitor waiting. Zoe, who had skipped school to see him. I need to talk to you, she said, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. About Mom and Preston. Maxwell ushered her inside and closed the door. What's going on, Zoe? Preston called last night after you went to bed. He and Mom were arguing about money. He wants her to sell her car, her jewelry, anything to get cash immediately. Zoe twisted her hands in her lap. He said they might need to leave the country. Maxwell kept his expression neutral. Did your mother agree? She was crying. Said she couldn't just abandon everything. He got really angry. Said she had to choose, him or the past. Zoe looked up, her eyes troubled. Dad, is Preston in serious trouble? Yes, Maxwell said simply. He's under investigation for investment fraud, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. And Mom? Is she in trouble too? Maxwell studied his daughter, seeing the fear behind her question. That depends on her choices in the next few days. What does that mean? It means your mother needs to decide where her loyalties lie. With a man who's facing criminal charges, or with her family. Zoe swallowed hard. And if she chooses him? Maxwell reached across the desk and took his daughter's hand. Then we'll face that together. You and me. Zoe nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I'm sorry, Dad. For everything. For the things I said when I thought you'd lost the Helix job. For going along with Mom's plans. You don't need to apologize, Maxwell said gently. You're 16. You were caught in an impossible situation created by adults who should have known better. Including you? Zoe asked, meeting his eyes. I'm not stupid, Dad. I know you've been planning something. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the way you've been watching Mom and Preston all these weeks. Maxwell considered his response carefully. Let's just say I decided not to be a passive victim in their game. Zoe studied him for a long moment. Good, she finally said. They deserve whatever's coming. That evening, Maxwell returned home to find Vanessa waiting for him, her expression resolute. We need to talk, she said, gesturing toward the living room. About the future. Maxwell set down his briefcase. I'm listening. I've made a decision, Vanessa began, pacing nervously. About Preston, about us, about everything. And I'm not leaving with him. She stopped pacing and faced Maxwell directly. I made a terrible mistake, getting involved with Preston again, letting him influence my decisions, my feelings about our marriage. Maxwell studied her, noting the calculation behind her apparent contrition. What changed your mind? The SEC investigation? The frozen accounts? Or did he ask for money you couldn't provide? Vanessa flinched. You don't have to be cruel. I'm trying to do the right thing here. The right thing would have been not betraying your family in the first place. Maxwell replied coldly. Not trying to sabotage my career, turn our daughter against me, and steal our savings. I know, Vanessa said, her voice breaking. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I'm asking you, begging you, to consider what's best for Zoe. For our family. Our family, Maxwell repeated. The one you were willing to destroy for a fresh start with Preston. That family. Vanessa's composure cracked. What do you want from me, Max? A confession? Fine. I betrayed you. I lied to you. I chose Preston over you because he made me feel alive again after years of feeling invisible in this marriage. Is that what you want to hear? What I want, Maxwell said quietly, is for you to understand exactly what you've done. Not just to me, but to yourself. Because as we speak, Preston Holbrook is making arrangements to flee the country. Alone. Vanessa stared at him. What? No, he wouldn't. He booked a one-way ticket to the Cayman Islands for tomorrow morning. First class. One passenger. Maxwell pulled out his phone and showed her the confirmation email Ryan had intercepted. He's abandoned his penthouse, moved his remaining liquid assets offshore, and made no arrangements for you to join him. That's not possible, Vanessa whispered, sinking onto the couch. He promised we'd face this together, just like he promised Audrey Whitman and Lisa Turner and Michelle Blakemore, all women who left their husbands for him, invested their savings in his opportunities, and were discarded when he was done with them. Vanessa's head snapped up. You've been in contact with his exes? I've been in contact with many people, Vanessa, building a case that will ensure Preston Holbrook spends the next decade in federal prison. Maxwell sat across from her. The SEC raid was just the beginning. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit is taking over the investigation now, and they have evidence not just of securities fraud, but of money laundering and tax evasion. How do you know all this? Vanessa asked, her voice barely audible. Because I orchestrated it, Maxwell replied simply. Every step, every leak, every witness coming forward. All part of a plan set in motion the day Diane Forrester called to tell me my wife had declined a job offer on my behalf and recommended her ex-boyfriend instead. Vanessa's face crumpled. What happens now? Now you make a choice, Maxwell said, rising to his feet. Stay here and face the consequences of your actions, or run after Preston and hope he hasn't already forgotten you. Either way, I've instructed my attorney to file for divorce on Monday morning. And Zoe stays with me. She's old enough to have a say in custody arrangements, and she's already made her choice clear. As if on cue, Zoe appeared at the top of the stairs. I heard everything, she said, her voice steady. And Dad's right. I'm staying with him. Vanessa looked from Maxwell to her daughter, the full weight of her actions finally crashing down on her. I never meant for it to end like this. Yes, you did, Maxwell replied. You just expected a different outcome. As he turned to head upstairs, leaving Vanessa sobbing on the couch, Maxwell felt no satisfaction, no triumph. Only a cold certainty that justice was finally being served. Chapter 8. Revelations. By Sunday evening, Preston Holbrook was in FBI custody, apprehended at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport as he attempted to board his flight to the Cayman Islands. The arrest made headlines across financial news networks, with details of the investigation painting a damning picture of a career built on deception and fraud. Maxwell watched the news coverage from Ryan Mercer's office, where his team had gathered to witness the culmination of their efforts. Margot Winters raised a glass of champagne and toast. To justice served, she said, her eyes bright with vindication. And to the man who made it happen. Maxwell accepted the praise with a nod, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He'd left Vanessa at home that morning, still reeling from the revelations of the previous days and facing the imminent disintegration of her life as she knew it. Zoe had chosen to spend the day with friends, needing space from both parents as she processed her own feelings about the situation. What's next for you, Maxwell? Audrey asked, studying his distant expression. After the divorce is finalized. Professionally, I have a division to build a helix, he replied. Personally, he shrugged. One day at a time. And Vanessa? Ryan inquired. Any further surveillance needed there? Maxwell shook his head. No, that chapter is closed. The divorce will proceed, and she'll face whatever financial fallout comes from her association with Preston. But she wasn't the primary target. Speaking of financial fallout, Margot interjected, my sources at the SEC say they're expanding the investigation to include all of Preston's associates and accomplices. They'll be interviewing Vanessa this week. Let them, Maxwell said. I've ensured she wasn't directly involved in his fraudulent activities. She may lose social standing and credibility, but she won't face criminal charges. Audrey raised an eyebrow. That's surprisingly merciful, given what she did to you. It's not mercy, Maxwell clarified. It's pragmatism. She's still Zoe's mother, and Zoe has been through enough without having to visit a parent in prison. The gathering broke up shortly after, each of Maxwell's allies returning to their lives, changed in various ways by their involvement in Preston's downfall. Ryan had secured new high-profile clients impressed by his discreet intelligence work. Margot had been contacted about a compliance officer position at a prestigious financial firm, her vindication making her expertise suddenly valuable again. And Audrey had begun dating one of the attorneys involved in building the case against Preston, finding unexpected connection and shared purpose. Maxwell drove home through the rain-slicked streets of Seattle, contemplating the swift dismantling of the life he'd known just months ago. The house he was returning to would soon be sold as part of the divorce settlement. His daughter was struggling to rebuild trust in both parents. His professional success at Helix was shadowed by the personal turmoil that had driven it. Vanessa's car was gone when he arrived home, a note on the kitchen counter explaining that she was staying with her sister for a few days to clear her head. The house felt empty, hollowed out by betrayal and revenge. Maxwell poured himself a scotch and settled in his home office, surrounded by the evidence of his meticulously executed plan. A soft knock on the office door startled him. Zoe stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "I thought you were staying at Brianna's tonight," Maxwell said, setting down his glass. "I was," Zoe replied, entering the room. "But I wanted to talk to you. Alone. About what happens now." She perched on the edge of the desk. "Mom called me. She's a mess. Keeps saying she made a terrible mistake, that she's lost everything." Maxwell nodded. "That's probably an accurate assessment. She wants me to convince you to give her another chance." Zoe studied her father's face. "She thinks you arranged all this, Preston's arrest, the SEC investigation, everything, to punish her for betraying you. And what do you think?" Zoe was quiet for a moment. "I think you did what you had to do. Preston was dangerous. He manipulated Mom, tried to steal your money, your job. He even tried to take me away from you." "That doesn't answer my question," Maxwell pressed gently. "I think part of you did want revenge," Zoe finally said. "And I don't blame you for that. But I also think you protected me, us, from someone who would have hurt us even worse in the long run." Maxwell reached out and squeezed his daughter's hand. "I never wanted you caught in the middle of this, Zoe. I know, but I was always going to be in the middle. That's where kids end up when their parents' marriage falls apart." She sighed. "Are you really going through with the divorce?" "Yes. Even if Mom begs for forgiveness? Even if she proves Preston was manipulating her too?" Maxwell considered his answer carefully. "There are some betrayals you can't come back from, Zoe. This is one of them. Your mother and I might eventually find a way to co-parent effectively, but our marriage is over." Zoe nodded, accepting this truth more easily than Maxwell had expected. "What about the house? Where will we live?" "I've been looking at condos downtown near my office. More manageable than this place and closer to your school." He hesitated. "But if you'd prefer something else." "No, that sounds good." Zoe offered a small smile. "A fresh start, right?" "Right." After Zoe went to bed, Maxwell sat alone with his thoughts, reviewing the events that had led to this moment. The revenge he'd orchestrated had been complete and devastating. Preston Holbrook faced years in prison. Vanessa had lost not only her lover, but her reputation in the social circles she valued so highly. The life they planned together had disintegrated in a matter of days. Yet Maxwell felt no triumph, no sense of victory. Only a hollow certainty that he'd done what was necessary to protect himself and his daughter from people who had been willing to destroy them without remorse. His phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "We need to talk. Not about us. About Zoe." Maxwell typed back, "Tomorrow. My office. 2 p.m. The response came quickly. "I'll be there." Setting his phone aside, Maxwell closed the file on Preston Holbrook for the last time. That chapter was finished. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new negotiations, a new life to construct from the ruins of the old one. And he would face it all with the same calculated determination that had guided his revenge. No longer the passive man who could be manipulated and discarded. No longer willing to forgive those who had betrayed his trust. A man transformed by betrayal into something harder, colder, and ultimately more powerful. The rain intensified outside, drumming against the windows like applause for a performance well executed. Maxwell raised his glass in silent acknowledgement of the man he had become, a man who would never again be anyone's victim. Chapter 9. Aftermath. 6 months after Preston Holbrook's arrest, the landscape of Maxwell Porter's life was almost unrecognizable. The divorce had been finalized with surprising efficiency, thanks in part to Vanessa's diminished will to fight after the public humiliation of her association with Preston and the loss of her daughter's trust. Maxwell and Zoe had settled into a sleek downtown condo with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. The Sustainable Urban Engineering Division at Helix Dynamics had grown under Maxwell's leadership, securing contracts across the Pacific Northwest and expanding into California. His professional reputation had soared, untouched by the personal drama that had driven his ambition. On a crisp autumn morning, Maxwell sat in a conference room at Helix, reviewing quarterly projections with his team when his assistant interrupted with an urgent message. "Mr. Porter, there's a call for you from Stillwater Federal Correctional Institution. From Preston Holbrook." The room fell silent. Everyone at Helix knew the broad outlines of the story, how their new division head had been instrumental in exposing a major investment fraud case. What they didn't know were the personal entanglements beneath the professional facade. "I'll take it in my office," Maxwell said calmly, excusing himself. Alone behind his closed door, Maxwell picked up the phone. "This is Porter." "Maxwell." Preston's voice had lost its smooth confidence, replaced by a strained formality. "Thank you for accepting my call. What do you want, Holbrook?" "To propose a deal." Preston paused. "I have information that might interest you." "About Vanessa." Maxwell's grip tightened on the receiver. "I doubt there's anything about my ex-wife that would interest me at this point. What about the fact that she's been visiting me in prison? That she still believes we have a future together once I'm released?" A cold smile crossed Maxwell's face. "Is that supposed to surprise me? Vanessa made her choice months ago. Her continued poor judgment is no longer my concern. What if I told you she's been selling off assets that should have been included in your divorce settlement? Assets she's hidden from the court." This caught Maxwell's attention. Not for the financial implications. He had more than enough, but for what it revealed about Vanessa's continued deception. "Go on." "She liquidated an investment account in her mother's name last month. Nearly $250,000 that should have been declared in the divorce proceedings." Preston's voice took on a cunning edge. "She's planning to use it to fund my appeal. And you're telling me this why? Having second thoughts about her loyalty?" Preston laughed bitterly. "Let's just say prison provides clarity. Vanessa's usefulness to me is limited now, and my sentence might be reduced if I cooperate with ongoing investigations, including providing evidence of Vanessa's financial fraud." Maxwell concluded. "Exactly. But I'd rather make a private arrangement with you first. Information in exchange for your support with the prosecutor's office." Maxwell leaned back in his chair, contemplating the offer. "What kind of support?" "A statement acknowledging that I was forthcoming about additional financial improprieties, that I've shown remorse and a willingness to make amends." "You want me to lie for you?" "I want a reduced sentence," Preston corrected. "And you want to ensure Vanessa faces consequences for trying to cheat you and the court. Seems like our interests align for once." Maxwell considered the proposal. He had no interest in helping Preston reduce his 8-year sentence for securities fraud. But the information about Vanessa's hidden assets could be valuable leverage in the ongoing negotiations about Zoe's college fund. "Here's my counteroffer," Maxwell said finally. "You provide me with documented proof of Vanessa's hidden assets, account numbers, transaction records, everything. In exchange, I won't actively oppose any legitimate cooperation agreement you reach with prosecutors." "That's it." Preston sounded disappointed. "No support letter? No testimony on my behalf? Take it or leave it, Holbrook. I have no incentive to help you beyond staying neutral." After a moment's hesitation, Preston agreed. "Fine. I'll have my attorney send the documentation to yours. But remember, I held up my end. Unlike every other promise you've ever made," Maxwell observed dryly. "Goodbye, Preston." Later that day, Maxwell met Zoe for lunch at a cafe near her school. At 17, she'd grown more serious over the past months, the family upheaval having accelerated her maturity. She'd thrown herself into her studies, particularly the computer science courses Maxwell had encouraged, and was now applying to engineering programs at top universities. "How was your calculus test?" Maxwell asked as they settled at a corner table. "Aced it," Zoe replied with a small smile. "Mr. Brennan said my proof was the most elegant in the class." "That's my girl." Maxwell regarded his daughter with quiet pride. Despite everything, she'd found her footing. "Have you decided which schools you're applying to early decision?" "Stanford and MIT. Like we discussed." Zoe toyed with her napkin. "Mom wants me to consider NYU too. She says New York would be transformative for me." Maxwell kept his expression neutral. "And what do you think?" "I think she wants me on the opposite coast from you," Zoe said bluntly. "She's still bitter about everything. Your college choice should be based on what's best for your future, not either of your parents' preferences." Zoe nodded. "I know." She hesitated before adding, "Mom's been acting weird lately. Secretive phone calls, meetings with her attorney. She mentioned something about financial restructuring yesterday." Maxwell considered whether to share what he'd learned from Preston, ultimately deciding against burdening Zoe with more family drama. "Your mother's finances are her business now, unless they affect your support or college fund." "That's just it," Zoe said, leaning forward. "She made a comment about my college fund needing to be adjusted because of unexpected legal expenses." "Do you think that means?" "It means nothing," Maxwell interrupted firmly. "Your college fund is secure. I made sure of it." The conviction in his voice seemed to reassure Zoe. They moved on to lighter topics, her upcoming robotics competition, his new project designing sustainable infrastructure for a coastal community, the hiking trip they were planning for spring break. As Maxwell watched his daughter talk animatedly about her future plans, he felt a rare moment of peace. The cost of his revenge had been high. A marriage destroyed, family relationships fractured, a coldness within himself that hadn't existed before. But Zoe was thriving, finding her path despite the upheaval. And he had emerged stronger, more respected professionally, unwilling to be manipulated or taken advantage of again. After lunch, Maxwell returned to his office to find an encrypted email from Preston's attorney had already arrived, containing detailed records of Vanessa's hidden assets. The documentation was comprehensive and damning. Not just the investment account in her mother's name, but 3 other concealed assets, including a vacation property in Palm Springs purchased just weeks before she filed financial disclosure forms in their divorce. Maxwell forwarded the information to his attorney with instructions to use it as leverage in finalizing the remaining financial aspects of the divorce, particularly securing Zoe's college fund beyond Vanessa's reach. He specified that he didn't want criminal charges pursued unless absolutely necessary, not out of mercy, but to avoid further disruption to Zoe's life. Later that evening, his phone rang with a call from an unexpected source, Diane Forrester from Helix Dynamics. "Maxwell," she said when he answered. "I hope I'm not disturbing your evening." "Not at all. What can I do for you, Diane?" "I wanted to give you a heads up before the official announcement tomorrow. The board has approved the expansion of your division into international markets, starting with the Singapore project we discussed last quarter." Maxwell sat up straighter. "That's excellent news." "There's more," Diane continued. "With the expansion comes a promotion. Executive Vice President of Global Sustainable Solutions, reporting directly to the CEO. The position represented a leap several levels up the corporate ladder, far beyond what Maxwell would have thought possible a year ago. "I'm honored and somewhat surprised at the speed of this decision." "Don't be. Your leadership has transformed that division, and the board recognizes exceptional talent." Diane paused. "Though I have to admit, I never imagined this outcome the day I called to tell you about your wife recommending someone else for the Denver position." "Life takes unexpected turns," Maxwell observed. "Indeed it does. The official offer letter will come tomorrow, but I wanted you to hear it from me first." "Congratulations, Maxwell. You've earned this." After hanging up, Maxwell stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his condo, watching the lights of Seattle sparkle across Elliott Bay. The promotion would mean more responsibility, more travel, more influence within Helix. It was everything he'd once dreamed of professionally. His phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "We need to talk. Urgently. About financial matters that affect Zoe." Maxwell typed back, "Contact my attorney." All communication goes through him now. Seconds later, another text. "This isn't about the divorce. It's about Preston. He's given you information, hasn't he?" Maxwell didn't respond. Let her worry. Let her wonder exactly what Preston had revealed and how Maxwell planned to use it. The uncertainty would be its own form of punishment. Instead, he called Zoe. "How would you feel about a trip to Singapore next month? The Singapore University of Technology and Design has an excellent engineering program. You might want to tour while we're there." Zoe's excitement was evident in her voice. "Seriously? That would be amazing. Is this for work?" "Yes, but we can extend it into a vacation. Just the two of us." After arranging the details with Zoe, Maxwell poured himself celebratory scotch and returned to the window view. In the reflection of the glass, he barely recognized the man he'd become. Confident, successful, uncompromising. So different from the husband who had arrived home 6 months ago to discover his wife had sabotaged his career opportunity and planned to leave him for her ex-boyfriend. His phone rang again. Vanessa, trying a direct call now that he'd ignored her texts. Maxwell silenced it without answering and added her number to his blocked list. That chapter was closed permanently. Tomorrow would bring the official promotion announcement. Next week, his attorney would use Preston's information to secure the final financial settlement. Next month, he and Zoe would travel to Singapore, beginning a new international phase of his career and her education. The future stretched before him, unencumbered by the betrayals of the past. Maxwell raised his glass in a silent toast to the lesson he'd learned and would never forget. Some debts can only be paid in full, some betrayals never forgiven, and some victories are measured not in what you gain, but in what your enemies lose. As the Seattle skyline twinkled before him, Maxwell Porter embraced the man he had become, a man who would never again be betrayed without exacting a price so complete, so devastating, that those who had crossed him would spend the rest of their lives reckoning with the consequences of their actions. And he regretted nothing. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation. Chad Herman stood in his kitchen, pouring his second cup of coffee as golden morning light filtered through the windows. At 34, he'd built what most would call a good life. A successful career as a senior software engineer, a beautiful home in the suburbs, and 7 years of marriage to Christy. His military intelligence background had translated well into civilian cybersecurity work, though these days his biggest challenges involved debugging code rather than analyzing enemy communications. "I'm heading out," Christy called from the hallway, her heels clicking against the hardwood. She appeared in the doorway, immaculate in a navy business suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. "Scott wants the quarterly reports by noon." Chad noticed the way her voice changed when she mentioned her boss. Softer, almost careful. He dismissed it as stress. Christy had been working late frequently since her promotion to senior account manager at Meridian Financial 6 months ago. "Another long day?" he asked, studying her face. "Probably. Don't wait up." She kissed his cheek quickly, already mentally elsewhere, and was gone. Chad heard their neighbor, Dean Fritz, calling out from his driveway as Christy pulled away. Dean was a retired postal worker, a friendly man in his 60s who'd lived on their street for 20 years. Chad stepped outside with his coffee. "Morning, Dean. Early start today." Dean shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Christy's disappearing car. "Chad, can I ask you something? Is your wife working from home these days?" "No, she works at the office." "Why?" Dean's weathered face creased with concern. "It's just, I see her home every afternoon, around 2:30. Her car's in the driveway for an hour or so, then she leaves again. Been happening for a few weeks now. The words hit Chad like cold water. You sure it's her car? Same silver Lexus. Same license plate. Dean looked genuinely troubled. Look, maybe it's nothing. Maybe she's running home for lunch or something. I just thought, well, if it were me, I want to know. Chad's mind raced, his analytical training kicking in automatically. Christy never mentioned coming home. She always said she ate at her desk or grabbed something with colleagues. Thanks for telling me, Dean. I appreciate it. Back inside, Chad sat at his kitchen table, fingers drumming against the wood. His phone buzzed, a text from Pete Gaines, his friend from his Army days who now ran a security consulting firm in the city. Drinks Thursday? Been too long, brother. Chad stared at the message, then at the empty house around him. The logical part of his brain, the part that had earned him commendations in military intelligence, began constructing possibilities, examining patterns. Christie's late nights, her distraction, the way she'd become protective of her phone, her newfound friendship with Scott Walker, the regional VP she reported to. He opened his laptop and pulled up their home security system. They'd installed cameras last year after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood. Front door, back door, driveway. He scrolled through the footage archives, finding Tuesday afternoon. There it was. Christie's Lexus pulling into the driveway at 2:17 p.m. She got out, checking her phone, then walked to the front door. Alone. The timestamp showed she left again at 3:42 p.m. Chad's jaw tightened. He checked Monday. Same pattern. Friday the week before. A rhythm of deception. He'd spent years analyzing intelligence, identifying patterns, predicting behavior. The signs were there, had been there, and he'd missed them because he'd trusted her. Because love made you blind to the obvious. But Chad Herman wasn't the type to act on emotion. When he'd worked intelligence, the key to every operation was information, complete, verified, actionable information. He needed to know exactly what he was dealing with before making any moves. He pulled out his phone and replied to Pete. Thursday works. Actually, I might need your professional expertise on something. Bring your work brain. Then Chad did something that would have been unthinkable a week ago. He called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Tomorrow, he wouldn't leave for the office. Tomorrow, he'd stay home and discover the truth. Chapter 2. The Hidden Truth. Tuesday morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. Chad went through his usual routine: shower, coffee, breakfast. Christy seemed more relaxed than usual, chatting about a new restaurant they should try, mentioning a work trip to Dallas next month. The lies came so easily to her now. I'll probably be late again, she said, grabbing her briefcase. Scott scheduled a meeting with the Houston clients at 4. Chad nodded, playing his part. No problem. Be safe. The moment her car disappeared down the street, Chad moved. He'd parked his truck in the garage the night before, closed the door. To anyone watching, the house appeared empty. He set his phone to silent and positioned himself where he had a clear view of both the front door and the staircase leading to the second floor. The hours crawled. Chad sat in the study adjacent to the living room, hidden from view but able to see through the partially open door. His military training had taught him patience, how to remain still, alert, focused. He'd once spent 14 hours in a surveillance post in Kandahar. This was nothing. At 2:23 p.m., he heard it, the distinctive purr of Christie's Lexus engine. His pulse quickened, but his breathing remained steady. The front door opened. Can't do this much longer. Christie's voice drifted in, and she wasn't alone. Chad's been asking questions about my schedule, so tell him about the Dallas trip. Buy us more time. A male voice. Scott Walker. Chad had met him twice at company events. Tall, athletic build, prematurely silver hair that he wore like a badge of distinction. The kind of man who thought his corner office made him untouchable. I hate lying to him, Christy said, but her voice lacked conviction. Scott laughed, a sound without warmth. You've been doing fine so far. Besides, you're not lying. You're protecting him from unnecessary pain until we figure this out. They moved into the living room, and Chad could see them now through the crack in the door. Scott pulled Christy close, and she didn't resist. The kiss that followed was intimate, familiar. Not a first-time indiscretion. This was practiced routine. Chad's hands clenched, but he remained perfectly still. Observe. Document. React later. When are you telling Martha? Christy asked, pulling back slightly. Soon. I'm working on it. These things take time. The prenup custody arrangements for the kids. I need to be strategic. Chad's analytical mind filed that away. Scott had children, a wife at home, and here he was, spinning the same lies to Christy that countless cheaters had used throughout history. You said that last month, Christy pressed. And I mean it. Scott's voice took on an edge. Unless you're getting cold feet? Because that wouldn't be good for anyone, especially you. You know how much I've invested in your career, Christy. Your promotion, the bonuses, those recommendations. I'd hate for people to think you slept your way into that position. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Chad felt ice form in his veins. This wasn't just an affair. Scott was leveraging Christy's career, manipulating her. Christy stiffened. That's not fair. I earned everything. Of course you did, Scott soothed, but his eyes were calculating. I'm just saying we're in this together. All the way, right? She nodded slowly, and Chad saw something he hadn't expected. Fear beneath the guilt in his wife's face. Whatever this relationship was, it wasn't equal. Scott had power over her, and he knew it. They headed upstairs. Chad heard the bedroom door close. He could have confronted them then, burst in with righteous anger. But that wasn't how you won wars. You won by understanding your enemy completely, finding their vulnerabilities, then striking with precision. Chad remained in position, using the time to think, to plan. Scott Walker wasn't just a cheater. He was a predator who used his position to manipulate employees. That suggested a pattern. One affair might be a mistake, but this kind of calculated behavior, this was someone who'd done it before. An hour later, he heard movement upstairs. Whispered goodbyes. Christy left first, her Lexus pulling away at 3:38 p.m. 5 minutes later, Scott's black BMW departed. Chad stood slowly, muscles stiff from remaining motionless. He walked upstairs, stood in the bedroom doorway. The bed was unmade, evidence of their betrayal. But instead of rage, he felt something colder, a tactical clarity he hadn't experienced since his military days. He pulled out his phone and texted Pete. Need to move our meeting to tonight. My place. Bring your discreet investigation toolkit. I've got a target that needs a deep background check. Then he called Drew Schwartz, a private investigator he'd met through work, someone who specialized in corporate malfeasance and personal investigations. Drew, it's Chad Herman. I need your services. Full surveillance and background on a subject, and I need it fast. Money's not an issue. What are we looking at? Infidelity, possible workplace coercion, and I'm betting a pattern of behavior. The target is Scott Walker, Regional VP at Meridian Financial. I want to know everything. Past relationships, former employees, any complaints, sealed settlements, everything. Drew whistled low. That's a corporate player. This could get complicated. That's why I'm hiring the best. And Drew, discretion is critical. No one can know I'm digging. Understood. I'll start tonight. Chad ended the call and walked to his home office. He opened his laptop and created a new encrypted folder labeled Project Accountability. Inside, he began documenting everything. Dates, times, the footage from today, Dean's observations, screenshots of Christie's calendar irregularities he'd noticed. He wasn't acting on emotion. He was building a case. And when he had all the pieces, Scott Walker would discover that ruining lives had consequences. Chapter 3. The Architect Emerges. Pete Gaines arrived at 8 p.m. sharp, carrying a tactical case that looked like ordinary luggage. At 46, Pete had transitioned from Army intelligence to private security, but he still carried himself like a soldier, alert, efficient, deadly when necessary. You look terrible, Pete observed, setting down his case in Chad's home office. Found out my wife's sleeping with her boss this afternoon. Hid in my own house like a stalker to confirm it. Chad's voice was eerily calm. Pete's expression hardened. You holding up? I'm functional. Emotional breakdown comes later. Right now, I need operational mode. Chad opened his laptop, showing Pete the documented evidence. The target is Scott Walker, VP at Meridian Financial. Married, 2 kids. He's been coercing Christy, using her career as leverage. Pete studied the screen. That's not just an affair. That's workplace exploitation. Exactly. And guys like this don't stop at one victim. I need you to help me find a pattern. What's the endgame here, Chad? Chad met his friend's eyes. Complete destruction. I want his career finished, his marriage exposed, his reputation obliterated. And I want it done systematically, so he knows exactly who did it and why. Pete nodded slowly. You're talking about war. I'm talking about justice. You in? Brother, I've been in since you called. Pete opened his case, revealing sophisticated surveillance equipment. Let's start with his digital footprint. You got access to their company network. I built their security infrastructure last year as a contractor. Still have administrative backdoors. Chad's fingers flew across the keyboard. Completely illegal to use them, of course. Good thing I didn't hear that. Pete pulled up a chair. What are we looking for? Communications. Scott mentioned a prenup, kids, being strategic. I want his emails, his calendar, his text messages if we can get them. And I want information on any female employees who left the company suddenly in the past 5 years. They worked in synchronized silence, the kind that came from years of operational partnership. Chad navigated through Meridian systems while Pete set up monitoring software. Got something, Pete said after an hour. Email thread between Scott and HR from 3 years ago. Regina Raymond, former account manager, filed a sexual harassment complaint. It was settled confidentially, sealed. She left with a severance package. Chad's jaw tightened. Find her. I want to talk to her. There's more. Joni Russo left 2 years ago. Crystal Holden, 18 months ago. All from Scott's department. All sudden departures with sealed settlements. He's been hunting in his own department for years. Chad stood pacing. The company's been covering it up, paying victims to stay quiet. His phone buzzed. Drew Schwartz. Chad. Preliminary reports interesting. Scott Walker has a sealed divorce record from 15 years ago. First wife claimed adultery and psychological abuse in the filing, but it was settled out of court. He remarried 10 years ago to Martha Burt. Comes from money. Family owns a pharmaceutical distribution company. So he married up. Needs the wife's money or connections. Gets better. I found a private Instagram account. One of those anonymous ones. User is Truth About SW. Post dating back 6 months, all about Scott Walker being a predator, using his position to manipulate women. Graphic details about his MO, the promises, the threats, the pattern. Chad's mind raced. Can you identify who runs the account? Working on it. But whoever it is, they've been trying to warn people. Posts are mostly ignored, only a few dozen followers. But the information is solid. Detailed. Has to be someone who knows him well. Keep digging. And Drew? Find out everything about Martha Walker. Where she goes, who she talks to, her routine. She's going to be a key player. After Pete left at midnight with assignments to track down the former employees, Chad sat alone in his office. The house felt different now, contaminated by betrayal. He pulled up photos from his and Christie's wedding, her smile radiant. His own face full of hope and trust. That man was gone. In his place was someone harder, someone who understood that mercy was for people who deserved it. His phone rang. Unknown number. Is this Chad Herman? A woman's voice, hesitant. Who's asking? My name is Regina Raymond. Pete Gaines tracked me down, said you wanted to talk about Scott Walker. Is it true? Is he doing it again? Chad's hand tightened on the phone. Yes. A bitter laugh. Of course he is. Who's the victim this time? My wife. Silence. Then, softly, I'm sorry. I tried to stop him, you know. Reported him, filed complaints. They buried it. Paid me to disappear. I was 26, needed the money, scared of what he'd do to my career. I took the settlement and stayed quiet. I'm not interested in staying quiet, Chad said. And I'm not taking settlements. I'm interested in making sure he never does this to anyone else. What do you need from me? Everything. Your story, documentation, anything you kept. And I need you to connect me with Joni Russo and Crystal Holden. I'm betting you all know each other. We do. Victims of the same predator tend to find each other. But the NDAs won't matter when this is over. Scott Walker broke your lives. I'm going to return the favor. But I need ammunition. Will you help me? Another pause. Yes. God, yes. What's the plan? Chad smiled, but held no warmth. I'm going to give him exactly what he deserves. But first, I need to finish gathering intelligence. Can you meet me tomorrow? Bring anything you have. Emails, text messages, records. Don't worry about the NDAs. When I'm done, his lawyers will be too busy defending him in criminal court to worry about civil violations. Criminal court? Scott Walker's been using his position to coerce employees into these sexual relationships. That's not just an HR problem, Regina. In many jurisdictions, that's sexual assault by coercion, and workplace intimidation, and fraud. If he promised career advancement, he couldn't or wouldn't deliver. I'm going to make sure every relevant authority knows about it. He could hear the hope in her voice. You can really do this? I spent 10 years in military intelligence. I know how to build an airtight case, how to leverage information, how to destroy targets. Scott Walker made a critical mistake. He threatened someone I love. He's about to learn what happens when you make an enemy of someone who knows how to fight back. After the call ended, Chad opened his encrypted folder and created a new document. Operation Reckoning. Phase 1 complete. Below it, he began outlining the next steps. He had the evidence of the affair. He had testimony from previous victims. He had access to corporate communications. And he had the skills to orchestrate a takedown that would be both legal and devastating. Scott Walker had used his power to manipulate vulnerable people. Now Chad would use knowledge, strategy, and patience to dismantle everything Scott had built. The game had begun, and this time, the predator had become the prey. Chapter 4. The Pattern Revealed. The coffee shop was deliberately public, neutral ground where Regina Raymond could feel safe. Chad arrived early, positioning himself where he could see the entrance. At 31, Regina had rebuilt her career at a smaller firm. But Pete's research showed she'd never fully recovered from her time at Meridian. Her trajectory had flatlined after leaving, years of potential wasted because one man couldn't keep his abuse of power in check. She arrived at exactly 10 a.m., looking around nervously before spotting Chad. Medium height, dark hair pulled back, professional but guarded. The wariness in her eyes spoke of hard-earned survival instincts. "Thank you for coming," Chad said as she sat down. "I almost didn't." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "The NDA, the fear, it doesn't just go away. But Pete said you were serious about stopping him. Dead serious. Tell me what happened." Regina took a breath. "I was 25 when I started at Meridian. Scott was my supervisor. Charming, attentive, made me feel special. It started small. Compliments, lunch meetings that ran long, texts after hours. By the time I realized what was happening, I was in too deep. How long did it last? 6 months. He promised me a senior position, said he was leaving his wife, all the classic lines. But when I tried to end it, he changed. Threatened to fire me, said I'd seduced him and he'd make sure everyone knew. So my career would be over." Her voice cracked. I was terrified. So I went to HR, and they buried it. Worse, they made me feel like I was the problem. Said there was no evidence of coercion, that it appeared to be a consensual relationship that had soured. Scott's version, that I was a scorned woman making false accusations, became the official story. They offered me 6 months' salary and a strict NDA. I took it because I had student loans, rent, and no other job lined up. Chad's expression remained neutral, but inside, rage burned cold and focused. "Did you keep anything?" "Texts, emails." Regina pulled out a flash drive. "Everything. I knew someday someone would need to see it. The texts where he promised promotions. The emails with implied threats. Voice messages where he's clearly manipulating me. And the HR communications showing they knew and chose to protect him." "Why didn't you go to the police?" "And say what? My boss and I had a relationship. And he was mean when it ended?" The texts are suggestive, but not explicit about the coercion. His lawyers would have destroyed me. I was a junior employee, he was a VP. No one would have believed me. She met his eyes. "But if there are others, if we can show a pattern, there are others. Joni Russo and Crystal Holden. And now my wife. God, I'm sorry. How much does she know about his history? Nothing. She thinks she's special, that he's leaving his wife for her. She doesn't know she's just the latest conquest. Regina shook her head bitterly. That's his playbook. Make them feel unique while dangling career advancement. And if they resist or try to leave, the threats come out. Does your wife know you're aware? Not yet. I'm gathering everything first. When I move, it'll be comprehensive. What's your plan? Chad leaned forward. Scott has been protected by corporate structure and NDAs. But if I can gather enough evidence, enough testimony, I can go beyond civil complaints. Coercion in a workplace relationship can constitute sexual harassment under federal law, possibly assault, depending on the jurisdiction. The company's pattern of covering it up suggests systematic violation of employment law. And if I can prove fraud, promises of advancement he never intended to keep, that opens other legal avenues. You're not just going after him. You're going after the company too. Meridian enabled him. They chose their VP over justice. Yes, they're complicit. Chad's voice was steel. But I need Joni and Crystal willing to testify. Can you set up a meeting? I'll try. But they're scared, Chad. We all are. Scott has power, money, lawyers. So did a lot of targets I took down overseas. Power is only effective if you know it's coming. I'm going to hit him from angles he won't see until it's too late. Chad stood. Make that meeting happen. And Regina? This time, you're not alone. That evening, Chad sat across from Pete Gaines in his office, the flash drive from Regina connected to his laptop. This is damning, Pete said, scrolling through messages. Clear quid pro quo. Play along and you'll get the promotion. Don't make this difficult or things will get complicated for you. He's not even subtle. Arrogance. He's gotten away with it so long. He stopped being careful. Chad pulled up another document. Drew sent over Scott's financial records. He has access through public records and some creative research. Scott's leveraged to the hilt. Big house, expensive cars, private school for the kids. He's living on credit and his wife's family money. So if the wife leaves, his lifestyle collapses. The prenup Drew found gives Martha most of the assets if he commits adultery. Scott's entire existence depends on keeping his marriage intact while he plays predator at work. Pete leaned back. You're not just planning to expose him. You're planning to dismantle his entire life. He dismantled Regina's career, traumatized Crystal and Joni, and manipulated my wife using her job security. Fair's fair. What about Christy? She's not innocent here. Chad's jaw tightened. She's a victim who became complicit. Scott manipulated her, but she still made choices. She'll face consequences. I'm not protecting her from this. But my priority is the predator, not the prey he groomed. His phone buzzed. Regina. Joni and Crystal agreed to meet. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. at my place. They're terrified, but angry enough to try. Chad, be prepared. Their stories are worse than mine. Worse how? Crystal was 19, an intern. Joni had just gotten divorced, was vulnerable. He picks targets who are easy to manipulate, then uses increasingly aggressive tactics. With Crystal, Regina's voice faltered. Just be prepared. The call ended. Pete watched Chad's expression darken. This guy's a monster, Pete said quietly. Monsters can be killed. You just need to know where to aim. Chad opened a new document. Here's the plan. Phase 1 is gathering evidence. Done. Phase 2 is building the coalition. In progress. Phase 3 is the exposure, timed and coordinated for maximum impact. And Phase 4, revenge. Justice. There's a difference. Revenge is emotional. Justice is calculated. Chad's eyes were hard. I'm going to make sure Scott Walker faces every consequence he's avoided, that Meridian Financial answers for its complicity, and that no one else becomes his victim. And I'm going to do it so thoroughly, so systematically, that he'll never recover. And your wife? Chad was silent for a moment. Christy made her choices. When this is over, she'll have to live with them. But I won't let her be defined by Scott Walker's manipulation. She gets a chance to rebuild. Him? He gets exactly what he deserves. Nothing less, nothing more. Pete nodded slowly. You're not the same guy I served with. That Chad would have just beat the hell out of him and called it done. That Chad trusted the world to be fair. This one knows better. This one understands that real victory comes from dismantling your enemy so completely they can't rise again. Chad closed his laptop. Tomorrow we meet the others. Then we start phase 3. What's phase 3? Chad smiled. Cold, calculated, dangerous. We introduce Scott Walker to his past. All of it. At once. In front of everyone who matters. Chapter 5. The Coalition. Regina Raymond's apartment was modest, but comfortable. A space that felt like a fortress, secure and private. When Chad arrived with Pete, Joni Russo and Crystal Holden were already there, both women visibly tense. Joni was 32, with sharp features and exhausted eyes. Crystal, now 23, looked younger, still carrying the wounded vulnerability of someone whose trust had been shattered early. "Thank you all for coming," Chad said, taking a seat across from them. "I know this is difficult, but I need you to understand. I'm not here to sensationalize your pain or to exploit your stories. I'm here to stop Scott Walker permanently, and I need your help to do it." Regina said, "You're the husband," Joni said, her voice carrying an edge of skepticism. "The latest victim's husband. Why should we trust that you won't just handle this privately and leave the rest of us exposed? Because private settlements are how he survived this long. This isn't about revenge for my marriage, though I won't lie, that's part of it. This is about making sure he never does this again." Chad opened his laptop, turning it to show them. "I've spent the last 48 hours building a case. Not just evidence of affairs, but documentation of systemic coercion, abuse of power, and corporate complicity. I have Regina's evidence, HR communications, financial records showing sealed settlements, and testimony from 3 victims. If you're willing, I can make this for." Crystal spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but firm. "What makes you think this will work? We tried. We filed complaints. We were erased. Because you were alone, isolated, forced into silence by NDAs and fear. But 4 victims, documented pattern of behavior, evidence of corporate cover-up? That's not an HR problem anymore. That's criminal investigation territory. That's a media firestorm. That's the kind of case that ends careers and brings down executives." "You're talking about going public," Joni said. "Strategically, yes, but not recklessly. I'm talking about coordinating with employment attorneys who specialize in workplace harassment, filing complaints with the EEOC, potentially involving state investigators, and timing the public exposure to coincide with legal action so you're protected." Regina leaned forward. "Walk us through it. What exactly is the plan?" Chad pulled up a detailed timeline. Phase 3 begins with legal mobilization. Tomorrow, I meet with Terry Greer, an employment attorney who specializes in hostile workplace cases and has successfully sued major corporations. She'll review all evidence and file a joint complaint with the EEOC on behalf of all victims. The complaint will include allegations of quid pro quo harassment, hostile work environment, and corporate negligence. The NDAs, Crystal started, are likely unenforceable in cases of illegal activity. Terry will argue that the NDAs were used to cover up ongoing criminal behavior, which voids them. And even if Meridian tries to enforce them, the penalties pale compared to what they'll face if this goes public without legal cover. "What about Scott's wife?" Joni asked. "Regina mentioned you've been researching her. Martha Walker is key. Drew's surveillance shows she's active in several charitable organizations, particularly ones focused on women's empowerment. Her family's pharmaceutical company has a public ethics board. She's not just a spouse. She's a person whose reputation and values are incompatible with what her husband's been doing." Pete spoke up. "We've also confirmed that Martha's family business is currently negotiating a major hospital contract. Any scandal involving family members could jeopardize it. She has strong motivation to distance herself from Scott once she knows the truth." "You're going to tell her," Regina realized. "At the right moment. After legal proceedings are initiated, after she's been briefed by attorneys representing the victims. She needs to understand this isn't gossip or rumor. It's documented fact, corroborated testimony, and imminent legal action." Chad's expression was intense. "Martha Walker doesn't strike me as someone who'll stand by a predator when given the full truth, especially when that truth threatens her family's business." Crystal wrapped her arms around herself. "What he did to me? I was an intern, 19 years old. He cornered me in his office after hours, said my performance review would reflect my willingness to be a team player. When I tried to refuse, he reminded me that I needed his recommendation for graduation credit. Without it, I wouldn't graduate on time. The room fell silent. Chad's hands clenched, but his voice remained controlled. Did you document any of it? I kept a journal. Detailed entries about every interaction, every threat, every time She couldn't finish. I was too scared to use it. Thought no one would believe me. I believe you. We all do. Chad made a note. That journal is evidence. Personal contemporaneous documentation carries significant weight in court. Joni's term was harder. I'd just gotten divorced. Single mom, desperate to keep my job. Scott presented himself as supportive, understanding. It became physical fast. Then he started making demands, availability after hours, lying to his wife about work trips that were really hotel rooms. When I tried to end it, he threatened to tell my ex-husband I was sleeping around, said he'd make sure I lost custody of my daughter. Tears formed in her eyes. I stayed for 3 more months before I couldn't take it anymore. HR gave me the same treatment as Regina, sealed settlement, NDA, erasure. And you've been living with that for 2 years, Chad said softly. Every day, wondering if I should have fought harder, reported him to police something. But I was terrified. He had all the power. Not anymore. Now we have the power of truth, documentation, and collective testimony. Chad looked at each woman. I need you to be brave one more time. Give me your evidence, your journals, your records. Trust Terry Greer to build the legal case. And when the time comes, stand together in testimony. What about your wife? Crystal asked. She's with him now, right? Doesn't she deserve to know what she's involved with? Chad's expression darkened. Christy will learn the truth. But timing matters. If I reveal everything to her now, she might warn Scott, give him time to destroy evidence or prepare a defense. She's still under his influence, still believes his lies. I need him isolated, exposed before she can interfere. That's cold, Joni observed. That's tactical. My marriage is over. I accepted that the moment I watch her bring him into our home. But I won't let sentiment compromise the operation. When Scott falls, he falls completely. Christy will have to deal with the aftermath. Regina studied him carefully. You're not doing this just for revenge, are you? There's something else. Chad was quiet for a moment. My last year in the military, I worked a case involving an officer who'd been sexually assaulting enlisted soldiers. He'd been doing it for years, using his rank to silence victims. We built the case, gathered testimony, did everything right. But the brass decided it was easier to quietly transfer him than deal with the scandal. Those victims never got justice. He never faced consequences. His eyes were hard. I won't let that happen again. Not when I have the power to stop it. The room was heavy with shared understanding. These were people who'd been failed by institutions designed to protect them. Now they were taking power back. I'm in, Regina said firmly. Me too, Joni added. Crystal nodded, tears streaming down her face. I want him to pay for what he did. To all of us. Then we moved forward together. Chad pulled out consent forms Terry had prepared. These authorized the attorney to represent you jointly, to share evidence among the group, and to coordinate legal action. Sign them, and tomorrow we file with the EEOC. Within 72 hours, Scott Walker will be under federal investigation. As each woman signed, Pete pulled Chad aside. What about the wife confrontation? When does that happen? Martha Walker gets briefed by Terry first, presented with irrefutable evidence. Then I'll meet with her personally, show her surveillance footage of Scott entering my house with Christy. She'll see him as both a cheating husband and a predator who used his position to manipulate my wife. 2 betrayals at once, personal and moral. You're betting she'll turn on him. I'm betting she'll protect herself and her family's interests. Love might make her forgive infidelity, but documented predation, illegal coercion, a pattern of behavior that threatens her family's business and reputation, that she can't ignore. And when Martha confronts Scott, Chad's smile was predatory. That's when the dominoes really start falling. Scott's carefully constructed life, his marriage, his reputation, his sense of control, it all crumbles at once. And while he's dealing with that chaos, the EEOC complaint becomes public, the victims come forward, and Meridian scrambles to contain a scandal that will destroy their credibility. Complete systematic destruction. He taught his victims that power means controlling information, using fear, isolating people. I'm teaching him that real power is knowing when and how to reveal everything at once. Chad looked back at the women, signing forms that would change their lives. They deserve to see him fall. They deserve justice. And they're going to get it. Chapter 6, The Reveal. Chad sat in his living room when Christy came home Thursday evening, a glass of whiskey untouched on the table beside him. 7 p.m. She was on time for once, probably because they'd planned to have dinner together. "Hey, sorry I'm late," she started, then saw his expression. "What's wrong?" "Sit down, Christy." Something in his tone made her freeze. "Chat, what's going on?" "I know about Scott. I've known for days." The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth, closed it, then sank onto the chair across from him. "Ow! Dean Fritz noticed your car here in the afternoons. Tuesday, I stayed home and watched you bring Scott into our house, into our bedroom." His voice was eerily calm, devoid of emotion. "I heard him threaten to ruin your career if you didn't stay compliant. I heard the manipulation, the coercion. All of it." Christy's hands trembled. "Chad, please, let me explain. Save it. I don't care about explanations or excuses. I care about facts. You've been having an affair with your boss for months. He's been using your career advancement as leverage. And you've been lying to me every single day." Tears streamed down her face. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. It started as just attention, someone who noticed me, appreciated me. Then it became more, and by the time I realized what was happening, I was in too deep. He said he'd leave Martha, that we'd be together. He's been telling that same lie to women for years." Chad pulled out his laptop, turned it to show her Regina Raymond's testimony. Meet Regina, one of Scott's previous victims. She heard the same promises. So did Joni Russo. And Crystal Holden, who was 19 when Scott coerced her into a relationship by threatening her graduation. Christy's face went white as she read. "No, Scott wouldn't." "Scott did. Repeatedly. You're not special, Christy. You're not his great love. You're his latest conquest, another employee he manipulated using the power dynamic. And when he's done with you, or when you become inconvenient, he'll discard you like all the others." She looked shattered, reality crashing down. "I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know about the others. Would it have mattered? You still made choices. You still brought him into our home, into our bed, while I was at work thinking you were the person I married." Chad stood, walked to the window. "But here's what you really don't know. The women Scott victimized? They're filing a joint EEOC complaint tomorrow. Federal investigation into workplace sexual harassment and coercion. Meridian Financial is about to be caught in a massive scandal, and Scott Walker is going to be the center of it. Oh my God. And Martha Walker is being briefed by an employment attorney right now about her husband's history. She's seeing evidence of his affairs, his coercion, his pattern of predatory behavior, including surveillance footage of him entering this house with you." Christy looked like she might be sick. "You're destroying him. I'm revealing him. There's a difference. Scott destroyed himself through years of abusing power. I'm just making sure everyone sees what he really is." Chad turned back to her. "The question is, what are you going to do?" "What do you mean?" "You have a choice. You can stand by Scott, try to warn him, be complicit in his defense. Or you can cooperate with the investigation, provide testimony about his coercion tactics, help ensure he faces consequences. Either way, our marriage is over. But one path lets you rebuild with some integrity intact. You want me to testify against him? I want you to tell the truth. About how it started, the promises he made, the ways he used your career advancement to maintain control. Because that pattern is what proves this isn't just infidelity, it's systematic abuse of power." Christy buried her face in her hands. "My career is over either way. When this comes out, everyone will know that you were manipulated by a predator who had power over your professional life. The other women are stepping forward publicly. You don't have to be defined by this, Christy, but you do have to choose a side. Some choice. destroy myself publicly, or protect a man who lied to me. You'll destroy yourself more by trying to protect him. The evidence is overwhelming. Scott's going down, with or without your testimony. The question is whether you go down with him as an enabler or emerge as another victim who found the courage to speak truth. She looked up at him, mascara streaking her face. What happens to us? There is no us. Not anymore. You made sure of that when you chose him. Chad's voice finally cracked with emotion. 7 years, Christy. 7 years, I trusted you, built a life with you, believed in us. And you threw it away for a predator who was using you like a disposable asset. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough, but I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't rebuild trust. Sorry doesn't erase what I saw in our bedroom. Sorry is just a word you use when you get caught. He grabbed his jacket. I'm staying at Pete's. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. Either call Terry Greer and schedule testimony, or don't. But understand, when this breaks, and it will break very soon, your choice will define what happens next. Where are you going? To finish what I started. Tomorrow, Martha Walker learns everything. Then the EEOC complaint goes public. Then Meridian's board gets a full briefing on their VP's criminal behavior. By Saturday, Scott Walker's entire world will have collapsed. He paused at the door. You can be part of the solution or part of his destruction. Choose wisely. He left her there, crying in the living room of the house they'd shared. There was no satisfaction in her pain, no joy in her realization. Just the cold understanding that some betrayals couldn't be forgiven, some trust couldn't be rebuilt. Phase 3 was in motion. And tomorrow, Scott Walker would learn what it felt like to have everything stripped away. Martha Walker's attorney, Iris Rogers, had arranged the meeting at her downtown office. High floor, expensive view, the kind of power space that declared authority. Martha arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, elegant in a tailored suit, her expression composed but curious. Iris made introductions. Martha, this is Terry Greer, employment attorney, and Chad Herman. They have information regarding your husband that requires your immediate attention. This is about Scott? Martha's composure flickered. What's happened? Terry opened her briefcase. Mrs. Walker, what I'm about to show you is disturbing. I represent 4 women who have filed federal complaints against your husband for workplace sexual harassment and coercion. The evidence is substantial and credible. Over the next hour, they walked Martha through everything. Regina's testimony and documentation. Crystal's journal detailing coercion as an intern. Joni's account of threats related to child custody. The patterns spanning years. Sealed settlements Meridian had paid. HR communications showing corporate knowledge and cover-up. Martha's face went from disbelief to horror to cold fury. 4 women. Years of this. And the company knew. They facilitated it by silencing victims and protecting your husband's position. Terry slid another document across. And there's a current situation involving my client's wife. Chad spoke for the first time. Scott has been having an affair with my wife, Christy Herman, who works under him at Meridian. He's been using the same playbook, promises of leaving his spouse, career advancement tied to compliance, threats when she showed signs of ending it. How long? 6 months that I can document. Possibly longer. Martha's hands trembled, but her voice stayed steady. Show me. Chad opened his laptop, played the security footage from Tuesday. Martha watched her husband enter a stranger's home, heard his voice making promises, issuing subtle threats, the intimacy that spoke of routine rather than impulse. When it ended, Martha stood and walked to the window, her back to them. I suspected over the years. Small signs, late nights, change behavior. But I told myself I was paranoid, that he wouldn't risk our family, our life. She turned, her eyes hard. I was wrong. Mrs. Walker, you need to understand, this isn't just infidelity. Your husband has been committing federal crimes. The EEOC investigation will be public. Media will cover this extensively. Your family's business interests could be affected. The hospital contract, Martha said immediately, her business acumen kicking in. Any scandal involving ethics violations could kill the negotiation. My family's company can't be associated with this. Exactly. Which is why we wanted you informed privately before the complaint becomes public tomorrow. Martha's expression hardened into something fierce. What do you need from me? Honestly, nothing. The case is solid without you. But if you're willing to cooperate, provide information about Scott's behavior, confirm patterns, perhaps testify about any admissions he's made, it strengthens everything. You'll have my full cooperation. And my attorneys will handle the divorce filing immediately, citing adultery and the prenuptial agreement clause. Martha looked at Chad. Your wife, is she cooperating? She's deciding. But her testimony isn't essential. The pattern is already established with 4 victims. Christy would just be corroboration. Martha nodded slowly. I'll see that Scott is removed from our home tonight. He'll be served with divorce papers and a restraining order before the EEOC complaint drops. Whatever assets he thinks he has access to will be frozen. And I'll make sure every relevant board member at my family's company knows exactly what kind of man he is. You're not trying to protect him, Terry observed. Protect him? He's endangered everything I've built, humiliated me, committed crimes while using my family's name and connections as cover. No, Ms. Greer, I'm not protecting him. I'm excising him from my life like the cancer he is. Martha's eyes were ice. Mr. Herman, I'm sorry for what my husband did to your marriage. If there's anything I can provide to assist your situation, testimony about his patterns, financial documentation, you have it. Thank you. That's more than I expected. Don't thank me. We're both victims of the same predator. The difference is, I have resources to make sure he never recovers. She gathered her belongings. When does this become public? Tomorrow morning. EEOC complaint, victim testimony, media coverage. By noon, it'll be everywhere. Good. He deserves to watch his world burn. Martha paused at the door. Mr. Herman, one question. Did you orchestrate all of this? The legal filing, the timing, my involvement, as revenge? Chad considered. I orchestrated it as justice. Revenge would have been simpler, more violent, less permanent. This is about making sure Scott Walker never has power over anyone again. Martha smiled grimly. Then I hope you succeed completely. After she left, Iris whistled low. That is a formidable woman. Remind me never to cross her. She's protecting her interests and her family, Terry said. But she's also genuinely furious. That combination makes her a powerful ally. Chad closed his laptop. Phase 4 begins tonight. Scott gets served with divorce papers, learns his wife knows everything. Tomorrow morning, the EEOC complaint breaks. By afternoon, Meridian's board will be in crisis mode. And through it all, Scott Walker will understand exactly who caused this and why. What about you? Terry asked. When this is over, where does that leave you? Starting over. Rebuilding. But with the knowledge that I didn't let a predator continue destroying lives. Chad stood. That's enough. He left the office knowing the trap was set. Tomorrow, Scott Walker would wake up to a nightmare of his own creation. And Chad would be there to watch it all unfold. Chapter 7. The Fall. Scott Walker's Thursday began with divorce papers served at 6 a.m. by a courier who waited for his signature. The papers were comprehensive. Adultery cited with specific evidence. Prenuptial agreement invoked. Martha requesting full custody of their children and the majority of marital assets. Attached was a restraining order barring him from the family home and requiring him to maintain distance from Martha and the children. By 6:30, his phone was exploding with calls from Meridian's legal team. The EEOC complaint had been filed electronically at midnight and was now public record. Media outlets were already requesting comment on allegations of systematic sexual harassment and coercion spanning multiple years. By 7 a.m., Scott sat in his car in his own driveway, now forbidden from entering his home, trying to process the coordinated destruction of his life. By 8 a.m., he was in emergency meetings with Meridian's executive team and attorneys, denying everything while they showed him documentation he couldn't refute. For victims, corroborated testimony, HR records proving company knowledge of previous incidents. The evidence was devastating. By 9 a.m., Scott realized who had orchestrated this. The security footage included in Martha's divorce filing showed him entering a home, Chad Herman's home, with Christy. The timestamp proved it was during business hours, showed them together in ways that couldn't be misinterpreted. Chad Herman had built this case, coordinated the timing, weaponized the information. Every piece had fallen exactly when it would cause maximum damage. Scott called Christy. She didn't answer. He texted, "We need to talk. Now." Her response came 5 minutes later. "I've given testimony to the EEOC investigator. I'm cooperating with the case. Don't contact me again." Scott stared at the message, disbelief giving way to fury. Christy had turned on him. Martha had turned on him. His victims had found each other and united against him. And behind it all was Chad Herman, pulling strings like a puppet master. At 11 a.m., Meridian CEO called a board meeting. Scott was summarily suspended pending investigation. His corporate email was disabled, building access revoked, company car confiscated. He was escorted from the building by security while employees watched, whispers spreading like wildfire. By noon, his face was on news websites. Meridian Financial VP accused of serial sexual harassment. The stories included victim testimony, legal expert analysis, speculation about criminal charges. His reputation was eviscerated in real time. At 2 p.m., Scott made his mistake. He drove to Chad Herman's house. Chad was ready. He'd known Scott would come. Men like him, used to control, to power over others, couldn't accept systematic defeat without confrontation. Chad had position cameras, notified Pete to be on standby, and waited. Scott's BMW screeched into the driveway. At 2:17 p.m., he stormed out, rage evident in every movement, and pounded on the front door. Chad opened it calmly. "Scott Walker, I wondered when you'd show up. You destroyed my life." Scott's face was red, veins bulging. "My marriage, my career, my reputation. You systematically destroyed everything." "No, I revealed everything. There's a difference." Chad leaned against the doorframe, completely relaxed. "You destroyed your own life through years of predatory behavior. I just made sure everyone saw it. You manipulated my wife, turned her against me. I showed your wife evidence of your crimes. She made her own decision based on facts. Martha's smarter than you gave her credit for." Scott's hands clenched into fists. "You had no right. I had every right. You brought your affair into my home, manipulated my wife using career coercion, and thought you'd face no consequences. You were wrong. Christy wanted it. She came to me. Christy was a junior employee, and you were her superior. You used that power dynamic, made promises tied to her career advancement, and threatened her job security when she showed signs of resistance. That's not consent, Scott. That's coercion. Federal law is very clear about the difference." Scott stepped forward, threatening. Chad didn't move. "You think you've won?" Scott snarled. "I have lawyers, connections, money." "Had. Past tense. Martha froze your assets this morning per the prenup. Your lawyers dropped you an hour ago when media coverage made you toxic. Your connections at Meridian are protecting themselves by cooperating with investigators." Chad's smile was cold. "You have nothing left but the consequences you earned." "You smug son of a," Scott lunged. Chad was ready. His military training kicked in instantly. He sidestepped, used Scott's momentum against him, and within seconds had him face down on the porch, arm twisted behind his back in a control hold. Not enough to injure, but enough to immobilize completely. "Here's what's going to happen," Chad said calmly, knee in Scott's back. "You going to calm down? Get back in your car and drive away. If you ever contact me, my wife, or any of the women you victimized again, I'll have you charged with harassment, intimidation, and violation of restraining orders. Are we clear? Go to hell." Chad applied slightly more pressure to the arm hold. Not damaging, but painful. "Are we clear?" "Yes," Scott gasped. Chad released him, stepping back smoothly. Scott scrambled to his feet, humiliated and furious. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is. The EEOC investigation will lead to criminal charges. Coercion, abuse of power, possibly fraud. Meridian will settle with victims to avoid prolonged litigation, and those settlements will include testimony about your behavior. Your name is permanently associated with predatory behavior. No company will hire you. No social circle will accept you. You're finished, Scott. I'll fight this. With what money? What reputation? What support system?" Chad's voice was implacable. You taught your victims that power means control. I taught you that real power is understanding systems and knowing exactly where to apply pressure. You never saw this coming because you were too arrogant to imagine someone smarter and more patient than you. Scott stood there, defeated rage etched on his face. Why? Why go this far? Because men like you only stop when they're completely destroyed. Anything less, and you'd find a way to hurt someone else. Chad crossed his arms. Regina Raymond, Crystal Holden, Joni Russo, my wife, you damaged all of them. You used fear and power to make them feel helpless. I'm showing them, and others like them, that predators can be stopped. That justice is possible. You're no hero. You're just as manipulative as you claim I am. I never claimed to be a hero. I'm a man who used skills and resources to stop a predator. If that required manipulation, surveillance, and strategic information warfare, so be it. The difference is my target was someone who deserved it. Scott turned toward his car, then paused. Christy will never forgive you for this. You destroyed her career, too. Christy's career was destroyed the moment you coerced her into an affair and used her advancement as leverage. I just exposed the truth. What she does with that is her choice. Chad's expression hardened. Now get off my property. And Scott, remember this feeling, this helplessness, this loss, this understanding that your actions have consequences. Remember it every day for the rest of your life. Scott drove away, tires screeching. Chad watched until the BMW disappeared, then pulled out his phone and texted Pete. Confrontation complete. He's rattled, defeated, and knows exactly who did this. Phase 4 successful. Pete's response. Criminal charges expected to be filed next week per my contact at the DA's office. Meridians settling with all 4 victims. Substantial amounts. Public acknowledgement of failures. You did it, brother. Chad looked at his house. The home he'd shared with Christy, now tainted by betrayal. But also the place where he'd planned and executed perfect justice. Where he'd proven that predators could be stopped by someone patient and smart enough to outmaneuver them. Tomorrow, he'd start rebuilding. Tonight, he'd acknowledge that sometimes the only way to stop evil was to be more strategic, more thorough, and more relentless than evil itself. Scott Walker had learned that lesson the hard way. Chapter 8, Aftermath. The news cycle devoured Scott Walker's fall with voracious efficiency. Within a week, the story had evolved from VP accused to mounting evidence to criminal charges filed. The district attorney announced 3 counts of coercion, workplace exploitation, and abuse of power, charges that carried significant prison time if convicted. Meridian Financial faced their own reckoning. The board launched an internal investigation that uncovered not just Scott's behavior, but systematic failures in HR, suppressed complaints, sealed settlements designed to protect executives rather than victims. The CEO resigned. The general counsel was fired. The company paid 7-figure settlements to Regina, Crystal, Joni, and 2 other victims who came forward after the initial complaint became public. Martha Walker moved with surgical precision. The divorce was finalized in record time, thanks to the adultery clause and Scott's inability to contest given the criminal proceedings. She retained the house, custody of the children, and the majority of assets. Scott was left with legal debt and a destroyed reputation. But the most satisfying moment for Chad came 2 weeks after the confrontation, when he received a call from Regina Raymond. Chad, I wanted to thank you. All of us do. You don't need to thank me. You had the courage to come forward. After years of silence, of thinking we were alone and powerless, you showed us we weren't. More than that, you showed us that predators can be stopped, that justice is possible even when systems fail. Her voice caught. My career is back on track. Crystal's back in school, free from the trauma that was holding her back. Joni's daughter will grow up knowing her mother fought back. That matters. What you all did, standing together, telling your truth, that's what stopped him. I just coordinated the timing. Regina laughed softly. You did a lot more than coordinate, and we know it. But I'll let you maintain that fiction if it helps you sleep at night. Just know, you change lives. Save future victims. That's worth something. After the call ended, Chad sat in his new apartment. Downtown loft, fresh start, no memories of betrayal. The divorce from Christie was proceeding smoothly. She'd given her testimony, cooperated with investigators, and was slowly rebuilding her career at a different firm. They'd spoken once since everything broke, a conversation that brought closure, if not forgiveness. "I was a victim too," she'd said quietly, "but I also made choices. I betrayed you, lied to you, brought him into our home. The fact that Scott manipulated me doesn't erase my responsibility. No, it doesn't. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know, watching you dismantle him, seeing the way you protected those women, it showed me the kind of person you really are. Strong, strategic, but also principled. I'm sorry I threw that away. We both lost something," Chad had replied. "The difference is, I'll recover. You'll have to live with your choices." Now, looking out over the city lights, Chad reflected on the entire operation. From Dean Fritz's warning to Scott's humiliation on his porch, every move had been calculated, timed, executed with precision. He'd used skills learned in military intelligence, applied them to civilian justice, and achieved complete victory. But it wasn't satisfaction he felt. It was something quieter, the understanding that he'd done what was necessary, that he'd protected future victims, that he'd proven predators weren't invincible. His phone rang. "Pete Gaines. You watching the news?" "Should I be?" Scott Walker's pleading guilty. His lawyers cut a deal: 3 years in prison, 5 years probation, registry as a sex offender, mandatory counseling. He's done fighting. Chad absorbed the news. 3 years seemed light, but the sex offender registry was lifetime. The probation restrictions meant supervised employment, limited contact with others, permanent stain on his record. Scott Walker would spend the rest of his life defined by his crimes. "He's finished," Chad said. "Completely. Hey, how are you holding up? This whole thing, your marriage, the investigation, confronting him, that's a lot to process." "I'm good. Better than good, actually. For the first time in months, I feel clear. Like I did something that mattered." "You did. Those women have their lives back. Scott's behind bars. The company's implementing real reforms. That's impact, brother." After they hung up, Chad opened his laptop and deleted the encrypted folder labeled Project Accountability. The evidence had served its purpose. The operation was complete. But before closing the laptop, he drafted one final message. An email to Dean Fritz, his neighbor who'd started everything with a simple observation. "Dean, wanted to thank you for your honesty weeks ago. Your warning set in motion events that stopped a predator and protected future victims. Sometimes the smallest acts of courage, speaking up when something seems wrong, have the biggest impact. Thank you for caring enough to say something." Chad. He hit send, then stood and walked to the window. The city sprawled below, millions of lives intersecting, each with their own struggles and victories. Chad Herman had entered this battle as a betrayed husband seeking revenge. He emerged as someone who'd learned that true victory wasn't destruction. It was using power responsibly, protecting the vulnerable, ensuring justice when systems failed. Scott Walker had been a predator who thought his position made him untouchable. He learned otherwise. And Chad had learned that the skills that made him dangerous, strategic thinking, patience, ability to coordinate complex operations, could be used for good. Tomorrow, he'd wake up in his new apartment, go to work, continue rebuilding. But tonight, he'd acknowledge that sometimes the world needed people willing to fight, to plan, to execute justice when no one else would. Scott Walker was finished, and Chad Herman had proven that intelligence, patience, and absolute commitment to justice could defeat even the most entrenched predators. Chapter 9, Resolution. 6 months after Scott Walker's guilty plea, Chad Herman found himself in an unexpected place. A small auditorium where Terry Greer was giving a presentation on workplace harassment law to HR professionals. She'd invited him to attend, saying his perspective might be valuable. What he didn't expect was being called to the stage. "I want to introduce someone who played a crucial role in the Walker case," Terry said, gesturing to Chad. "Not a lawyer, not law enforcement, but a victim's spouse who understood that stopping predators requires strategic thinking, patience, and absolute commitment to justice." Chad walked up reluctantly, uncomfortable with the attention. The audience, mostly HR professionals and corporate attorneys, looked at him with curiosity. "I'm not a hero," Chad began. "I'm someone who used skills from my military intelligence background to stop a man who was destroying lives. But the real heroes are the women who came forward. Regina Raymond, Crystal Holden, Joni Russo, and yes, even my ex-wife Christy. They found courage when systems had failed them." An audience member raised her hand. "What would you say to other companies dealing with similar situations?" Stop protecting predators. The NDAs, the sealed settlements, the quiet transfers, they don't solve problems. They just give predators new hunting grounds. When someone reports harassment, investigate thoroughly, believe victims, and act decisively. Because if you don't, someone like me will, and the results will be much worse for everyone involved. Another question: do you regret how far you took it? The public exposure, the systematic destruction of his life. Chad considered carefully. "I regret that it was necessary. But Scott Walker had years to stop, multiple chances to face consequences, and chose to continue victimizing people. Partial measures wouldn't have stopped him. He needed to be completely removed from positions of power. Do I regret ensuring he can never hurt anyone again? No." After the presentation, Regina, Crystal, and Joni approached him in the lobby. "We've started a support network," Regina explained, "for victims of workplace coercion and harassment. Sharing resources, legal contacts, therapeutic support. We're using what happened to help others." "That's incredible. It was your example," Crystal said. "You showed us that fighting back is possible, that predators can be stopped. Now we're paying that forward." Joni added, "We wanted you to know, Scott's case set precedent. 2 other major companies have been investigated using similar frameworks. Victims are coming forward because they saw justice was possible." Chad felt something shift, the cold, tactical approach he'd maintained throughout the operation warming into something more human. "You all did that. I just helped coordinate." "You did more than coordinate," Regina insisted. "You taught us that intelligence, planning, and strategic action can overcome institutional power. That matters." As they left, Chad stood alone in the lobby, reflecting on the journey. From a morning, Dean Fritz warned him to this moment. He'd transformed from a betrayed husband into someone who'd executed perfect justice. His phone buzzed. A text from Martha Walker. They'd stayed in occasional contact, united by shared experience. "Heard you spoke at Terry's seminar. The kids are doing well, adjusting. I've started consulting with companies on executive accountability. Turns out nearly destroying a predator gives you credibility in reform circles. Thank you again for revealing the truth." Chad smiled, responding, "You protected your children and held them accountable. That took strength. Glad you're all moving forward." He walked outside into afternoon sunshine. His life was different now. New apartment, new routines, new understanding of his own capabilities. The betrayal still stung sometimes, but it no longer defined him. What defined him was the knowledge that he'd used skills meant for war to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. That he'd taken the pain of betrayal and channeled it into systematic justice. That he'd proven predators weren't untouchable. They just hadn't met someone patient and smart enough to outmaneuver them. His phone rang. Pete Gaines. "Hey, brother. Got a consulting offer from a security firm. They want someone with strategic planning skills, experience in complex operations. Thought of you immediately. I'm not looking to change jobs. It's not full-time. Contract work, helping companies improve security infrastructure, identifying vulnerabilities. Your analytical mind, your ability to see patterns, it's valuable." Chad considered. "Send me the details." After hanging up, he walked toward his car, mind already analyzing the opportunity. Using his skills constructively, helping prevent problems rather than just solving them after the fact. Scott Walker was in prison, serving his sentence. His name was synonymous with predatory behavior. His victims had found justice, support, and the courage to help others. And Chad Herman had learned that sometimes the best revenge wasn't revenge at all. It was justice so complete, so thorough, that the predator's very name became a warning to others. He drove home as the sun set, the city transforming in golden light. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities. But tonight, he'd rest knowing he'd done something that mattered. In his apartment, Chad opened his laptop one final time and wrote a single document. Not for anyone else, just for himself. A record of lessons learned. Victory isn't about destruction. It's about protection. Justice requires patience, planning, and perfect execution. Predators thrive in silence. Exposure is the ultimate weapon. Trust is earned through actions, not words. Sometimes the skills that make you dangerous are exactly what the world needs. He saved the document, closed the laptop, and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, people were being victimized, manipulated, coerced by those with power. Somewhere, systems were failing to protect the vulnerable. But also somewhere, people were finding courage to speak up, to fight back, to demand justice.